Hillman submitted revisioning to a publisher, and they're saying this will set psychology back 400 years. And
You would say, well, I'm shooting for 2000,
I
but
know that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. Uh,
400 years, that's all? Come on.
yeah, at least.
We can do
At
better.
least you have to go a lot farther back. But I was saying mainstream psychology, which I know all too well, having worked in multiple institutions and a lot of consulting with a lot of academic departments in psychology, that kind of psychology, academic psychology, is interested in the psyche in the same way that Audubon was interested in birds. He would go out in nature and shoot them, and then he'd bring them home and stuff them and pose them in naturalistic poses, and that's what he would draw is a
Mhm.
stuffed dead bird. And I was saying that's what mainstream psychology is interested in, is a stuffed dead experience.
Scott Becker, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Hillman's Revisioning Psychology.
I'm glad you caught that anniversary. I'm not sure if that's out there, but it's an important book, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I've had this discussion. I've done 5 or 6 conversations so far with some of our elders in the archetypal psychology world, and all of them are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe no one else is doing something for this occasion." So I'm glad I heard the call and I followed up on it and just said, you know what, let's just do something and see what happens, you know?
Exactly. I was starting to organize sort of an online meeting or conference through Spring Publications, and we were going to call it "We've had 130 years of psychotherapy, and the world's still getting worse." So
Yeah.
we're
I've co-
that's more
I've come up
recent
with
though.
that title too for different things too, but the way I put it is the world's getting even worse. You know,
Yeah, that's right. That's, yep, that's it.
that's funny that you bring that up because I was thinking this morning ahead of our conversation that maybe we could title this something like "We've had 50 years of revisioning psychology and psychotherapies getting worse."
I can't disagree. I watch it all around me, and I can't disagree.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're in it. You're in the mix. You're on the front lines. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my work.
Yeah,
Is
maybe just give a little introduction to people listening, just so they have an idea of who you are and what you're doing out there.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily on anyone's radar yet, but I have been involved in a couple of projects with Hillman and Spring. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. My introduction to archetypal psychology was actually embedded within that program. It was probably the only one in the country, I think, that was doing that at the time within the clinical psych PhD program. So I was always either trying to hide or blend or pass as a regular clinician. But actually, those are the ideas that have been informing my work all along. So I've worked a lot in university settings. And for about the past 6, 7 years, I've been in private practice in mid Michigan,
Hmm.
where it's cold today.
Yeah, we're getting there too, out on the West Coast. Where did you go to school? Did you go to Pacifica or somewhere else?
No, that was the interesting thing to Hillman, I think, when he found out about my program. It was really just my mentor, Roger Knudsen. So he met Hillman in a non-academic way, and I think that made a big difference. It's not totally my story to tell, but he was at a men's conference. His group had been assigned an initiation ritual, and they had all but completed it when Hillman came and had to inform them that the other groups were upset and they wanted to pause and regroup and have an ambassador from each group come together and they would design the ritual. And the group was pretty upset. And uh, Roger, being an ex-Marine, was really assertive about that. So they I don't know if they argued, but they had a genuinely tense conversation, and that gradually led into talking about other things. But Roger had confessed that he wasn't likely to have approached James in that way if they had met at an academic conference. So they bypassed all the titles and niceties, and they got into something very real. So Hillman would come back. First time he came to my program, I was no longer a student there, but I would come back and sort of guest teach with Roger and James, and we got to know each other over the years at other venues where Hillman was presenting, and the three of us would have lunch or a beer or something, and it was informal, but it also introduced me to James the person, and him to me. We wouldn't have met otherwise. But eventually, he asked me to edit volume 7 of the Uniform Edition and do it. There's a strange story around this, but basically, I became the psychological commentator in the biography in the first volume. So that all happened at once around 2008. But this had been going on. I'd known him for about probably 13 years before that.
Hmm. Sorry, I missed what school you were going to.
I don't think I said it's at Miami of Ohio, so Miami University of Ohio, and they're defensive about because the tribal source of that started in that region, and then
Oh,
of course there was the forcing out of indigenous folks. So Miami of Ohio, the university has T-shirts that would say "Miami is in Ohio, damn it," and they were sort of defensive about it. We're not the University of Miami. So it's a public-private sort of. It's sort of well funded, but it's a public school near Cincinnati, in the
hmm,
hilly part of Ohio,
hmm,
which is where I grew up and did my undergraduate work. And
hmm. Okay.
yeah,
And I got to ask, what was Hillman like to have a beer with?
with me, he was quite friendly. He could be prickly with some folks. He could be downright dismissive with some folks. But I think I was so much younger. He's roughly 40 years older than I was. So I was in my late 20s. My mentor was in his late 40s, and Hillman was in his late 60s at the time. So he was pretty relaxed. He was coming out with the Soul's Code, told us about it before it came out,
Hmm.
was giving us hints about it. He was very warm with me. He laughed a lot. He did say no. He always says no to things. He always when I
If he
first met
doesn't
him,
agree.
yeah, when I first met him, I was at a conference in Northern Kentucky, kind of a philosophy conference, and he was coming in, and I introduced myself as one of Roger's students, and he said, "I don't do names." And so it was instantly deflating.
Oh my God.
It was really, but it was perfect. That is who he was. I mean, he was always saying not this, but that.
I
So
don't do names.
yeah, but by
There's
the
too
end of
many of you.
there were, there were
Yeah.
about 5 or 6 of us, and he was not going to be memorizing names. And what's funny is I don't remember names well either. So I was like, oh, good, we don't have to do that. But by the end of the
Right. We can
evening,
we can dismiss that nicety and just let's be real.
exactly, it bypassed ego completely, or whatever illusions I had about impressing him early on. But by the end of the evening, we were in a small group talking about uh, the talk he had just given and the idea of the diamond, and uh, he was saying, "Why do people have trouble with it?" And I was saying, "Well, I think it's because they want it to be all or nothing. Either I'm in charge or the diamond's in charge, and it's more subtle than that." He's like, "Oh, the nudger." I was like, "Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
good way of explaining what you
Yeah.
just told us about." But then we got on the elevator at the end of the night, and we were going up the elevator. He was asking where I was, and I think at the time I was actually just finishing up. I was on my doctoral internship, so we got on the elevator, and he hit his button, and he was asking me where I was, and he's saying, "Oh, there's a good person there at Notre Dame." And then I realized I hadn't pushed my button, so when he got off, I had to stay in the elevator and go back down, which is also, literally, deflating. And it was really funny to me. But we met as people, I think, mostly. There were some ideas, but I liked the way it happened because I wasn't coming up and asking for his autograph after a lecture somewhere. It was more organic than that.
Yeah,
And so,
just
yeah,
following him up to his room, that's all.
just stalking.
Inadvertently.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was fun to talk to him. We would play around with ideas. The one I remember really vividly is there was a tribute late in his life in Pittsburgh Stan Marlin hosted,
Hmm.
and David Miller, whose work I just really respect, was facilitating a dialogue. And so I was sitting back, and James was sitting at the table all alone for our discussion group. So I was like, well, let's just go. My partner and I were there. So we went up and sat with him, and it was just the three of us at the table. And, he had me get up at one point and try to share what we had been talking about. But it was really, um, what I got out of it was just how many different kinds of people were there, how many people, different personalities, different regions, different dialects, different languages, different perspectives on his work. And it was,
Right.
it was,
Different
it just gave you an image of,
vocations,
yeah,
probably, right? Like
yes, exactly. And it just,
architects, civil planners, writers, artists, and
100%.
therapists. Yeah.
Yes. So it was of this sort of an image of how broad his reach is. I guess
Hmm.
that's obvious, but just to see it all in one room. And, we were, someone was talking about method, therapeutic method. And I was saying, I wrote down I jotted down animal precision because, squirrels just jump, they don't measure.
Hmm.
And Hillman says spontaneously, a dog never clears its throat before it barks. And
I've heard that one. Yeah, it's great.
yeah, he started laughing, and that's the kind of relationship. I mean, there was a little bit more serious back and forth on the biography in places. There was a conversation through mail about the idea of suffering, and he wanted to be very clear about what that was in his life and what it wasn't. But it was really just he gave me a blessing, I think. It wasn't a mentoring relationship. It wasn't something where we corresponded a lot or hung out or, I never took a class of his. But I think because I had come from outside and because I was young and not in that sort of first generation of people who were known and probably dealing with reputation and their own ideas that they'd already worked out in public, that I think that's why he asked me to work on the biography. He knew that I wrote qualitative research. I did interviews and life stories and narrative research. So I think having seen some of that, he felt comfortable asking. And then he was just happy with how it was going, and he had Dick Russell include the commentary in the text. There was a point where we were going to do a three-way, three voices in the text. It would be Russell sharing the narrative, Hillman commenting, and my commenting. But James' health started to decline, and he pulled out of that
Hmm.
part of it.
I can't really imagine him following through with, commenting on someone else's telling of his narrative. Seems just kind of too tedious or something.
I think the main point, and maybe the reason that I was brought in, this is my interpretation, was to make sure that the narrative was in service of the ideas, that the ideas weren't explained by the life events, really more the other way around. Or as,
Hmm.
that his ideas had a life of their own and maybe were inspired by, but I don't think he wanted it to be biographically reductive.
Right, to avoid that kind of causality that he was so critical of in developmental psychology.
Exactly.
Yeah, can't you see why he ended up talking about why these things were important to him? Because in his childhood, blah, 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 that kind of
Or
thing,
he
right?
was betrayed and wrote about betrayal, or
Yeah, or he had a father issue, which is why he was a post-Jungian and, etc.
right. There was a dream he had always alluded to, that he had in. Have you read the biography? I don't know if this is
Yeah, I read maybe the second one was more
okay.
interesting to me because it was more about the development of his ideas,
Absolutely
more so than his childhood, which
right.
doesn't interest me really.
But I didn't contribute to that one, so I can't help you. But no, but in the first volume, he had talked in public about a dream that he'd had prior to coming to the Jung Institute, and he was clear that it was a bad dream, and he was clear that he went to Zurich as a patient and not as a student, although he kind of did both when he got there. But he'd been writing a novel, and the novel was failing, and he was getting really down about it. He wanted to be a fiction writer, a novelist. So he went to interview guru in India and was really strongly influenced by it. I think he's written about it, the Kundalini essay,
Hmm.
the commentary. But he was sent sort of up the mountain to have a big dream, and instead he had a humiliating, sort of mundane nightmare about a bunk bed, and his grandmother and his mother were in the beds, and he just woke up devastated because he had wanted a big inspirational, this is your calling dream, and it sent him to Zurich as a patient. So no one had ever heard it before publicly, as far as I know. He
Mm.
had never shared it. So I was in the odd position of interpreting it, and I worked deliberately not to be Freudian or reductive or personalistic. I tried to play around with the imagery, and it I can't remember if he commented on that one, but some of the other comments I had made, he was happy with. So I think I was sort of following the unspoken rubric of trying to amplify rather than reduce.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm curious. Probably the people listening are curious too. I mean, what did you make of the dream?
Well, I think the dream was deliberately humiliating. I think it was that wanting a big dream is bunk, or it's double bunk. Uh, that he went from the peaks to the vales. He went up the mountain to be inspired spiritually, and he came down into the valley, low and humbled and ready to look at his past. I didn't interpret the mother or grandmother because I didn't have any biographical. I didn't have any really, developmental or traumatic narrative around that. So I left that part completely alone. But I think
Mm.
I think the fact that it's the mother and the grandmother, if you were Jungian, you might amplify that in the direction of the sacred feminine and the mother archetype, and that it was an anima sort of dream. It was more about the ancestry and feeling and relationship than it was about spirit and high soaring ambition. So I don't remember exactly how I worded it, but that's
Hmm.
basically where I was going, is staying low, because that seemed to be what the dream was doing,
Mm. Well,
keeping
and
him
in
low.
beds too. So there's that association with dreaming and the underworld, which is such a big part of his work.
Yes. Yeah,
And
I think his calling was downward, right?
yeah, and I mean, he definitely, I mean, he served Anima throughout his career.
Very much.
Yeah. Okay, so you did the psychological commentary before doing the intro to Inhuman Relations, which is volume 7 of the
Yes.
Uniform Edition.
He asked me to do both around the same time, and it was in the
Hmm.
fall of 2008. My son had just been born. My first kid had just been born. It was a big fall for me. But yeah, he got from me the suggestion to organize the essays in terms of their process, their impact on the reader, rather than their thematic relations between each other, which was the way he had originally sent them. They were in bundles, mother and child therapy. He had organized it not chronologically. He made it very clear he didn't want that, but um, he liked the idea of exploring how the essays affect the reader, sort of the alchemical impact of engaging with the material on a deep level. But he never got to read that essay, so I don't know what he
Hmm.
would have made of that. He kind of put the project on the back burner. He said our project must simmer slowly, and so it sat in a box in my office at home for years, really. And then Klaus Ottman, who's the editor at Spring, contacted me several years after James's death and said we're ready to go. And that's when I started cooking up the essay. But what had happened in the meantime is that I put this in the essay. The world had been getting much more um, tense and heated, and when the project was simmering, the world was coming to a boil. So I used that and tried to write about what was happening. This was right around the time of the pandemic,
Hmm.
so the world felt very much in crisis. So I tried to address
Yeah.
that in the essay.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that time, I mean, we're still living in the wake of it for sure. But it was not only the pandemic and the lockdowns and all the divisiveness around vaccines, but at that time there was all, that upheaval of racial relations in the United States brought about by
Yes.
the George Floyd murder and the kind of protests slash riots that were going on and Trump, you know, like kind of post
All of
Trump
that.
one era and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was intense, and it felt as though James would have tackled it himself.
Hmm.
There are two different, well, there are many ways to look at Hillman, but one is to say he was following Jung and just exploring the same themes from a different angle. I think he was much more of a reactive and sort of, even when he switched to the world and away from therapy, he was still a therapist. He was still trying to deconstruct and redirect and revision things that were happening in the world. And I think he would have, I mean, he predicted some of the things that were happening. I mean, he wasn't deliberately a prophet, but there was a lot of what he wrote that was kind of prescient. So I think he would have tackled it head on in the way that he did for the Ground Zero essay. That's another story. I was with him the night of 9/11. He was
Hmm.
visiting that program, and I was back because my partner at the time was in grad school there. And so we had dinner with a bunch of architects, and we were talking about the buildings coming down.
Hmm.
And there were psychologists and architects there. So it was an
Yeah.
interesting conversation. But he, in that essay, he said we should have snatched some defeat from the jaws of the Y2K victory.
Hmm.
We should have seen more of a collapse coming than we did. He was basically saying we went into a form of dissociative denial about just how precarious all this was. So September 11th was his way of diving into that as well, and to look at what he was later calling the Titanic going down. I guess he put that in. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy too, but
Yeah,
he
he's
would
been
have
saying that
pounced
for
on
a
this
long
stuff.
time. Yeah. The
He's not
ship's going
wrong.
down, and then the
Yeah,
question is, well, what are you going to do while the ship goes down? You know.
yeah, and he says work on the plumbing, right? You know,
Hmm.
I've always liked the scene in the film where the string quartet is deciding to play on.
Yeah, that's me up on the deck playing some music while we go down. I'm not bailing out the water. It's like it's a lost cause, but
I think, yeah, and that's sort of where I think he would have gone. I think it's somewhere in volume 3 of the biography. He did an interview and he's saying if the world is collapsing, we should probably hasten that. We
hmm.
we should invite it because what's the point of bailing the Titanic or propping up the towers or pretending that our democracy isn't broken? I mean, it's all
Yeah.
kind of a piece. So, and that's what I was starting to do in that essay for the Inhuman Relations volume is what kind of mythic perspective, it doesn't have to be mythic, but what kind of imaginal perspective connects some of the dots. And so I did some of that with racism and the economic issues and the patriarchy. And I was looking at reframing the image of Medusa, reclaiming her from the patriarchal Olympian narrative and looking more south and farther back in time to when she was the crone goddess for the triple goddess Neith in North Africa. And so that Joseph Campbell covered this, but a lot of those myths were co-opted by the invading forces. And so Anata was the maiden aspect of Neith, and she became Athena. And Metis became the mother goddess Demeter. And Medusa, who was a powerful figure of, sort of a non-dual image of death. She was the images on the temples that you'd have to pass to let you know that you were in a serious space. But that all got turned into she's a maiden and she transgressed and she got turned into a monster. But originally she was the the scary aspect of the goddess. So I just went back farther and said, a lot of what we're dealing with has to do with this displacement, not to idealize matriarchal culture, but there was a very different sort of non-dual take on life and death, from womb to tomb, maiden, mother, crone. There wasn't the same kind of hierarchy and there was a different relationship to death, and there was a different relationship to land. And race was part of it. The North African um, people, the women who followed Medusa had dreadlocks, and that's the snakes in the hair are thought to sort of echo that. But it was a very different version of the myth, and a number of people have written about it. But I was linking that to the pussycat hats and the issues of our relationship to the earth and the rights of women, uh, all of that. If you go back farther, then it's about land ownership and royalty and money, which was
Mm.
invented in Samaria, 10,000 years ago or something. So if you look at the roots of all this, it goes back before Greece. It goes back to when we kind of switched over from a circular worldview to a linear one.
Mm.
And I think that's in play a lot right now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see that too with the kind of the rise of the new Christianism that's kind of happening in intellectual and political spheres. I mean, Christianity really introduced that linearity into Western culture in a big way.
Yeah, there's a wonderful book. I think Tom Cheetham mentioned it when you were talking to him, but it's called Sand Talk by Tyson
Mm,
Yunkaporta.
mm,
Uh, Tyson is an academic, a university academic in Australia, but he's also initiated in his tradition there, and he makes it very clear that the Aboriginal culture is not monolithic. There are many different perspectives, many layers of stories, and he only knows some of them. But the interesting thing about the book was that he wasn't saying, "Look at our beautiful culture. Wouldn't it be great if the world was like this?" He uses his knowledge, his wisdom, his training to look at the West and to critique it. So one of the things he talks about, he's basically saying, look, if you want to hear what's wrong with what you're doing, here you go. So he's saying, among other things, cities are closed systems. Cities are built on this idea of linear growth. And as a result, they're draining the entire ecosystem. And it goes beyond just the literal natural material world. It's a very spiritualized world that, the dream time that Robbie Bosnak wrote about and Tracks in the Wilderness of Dreaming. I mean, it's very much the spirits are as much a part of the system as anything else. But he's basically saying we have an open system worldview. We don't fish this fish in this stream because we know in the spring it's going to be eaten by this other animal. And they have a very elaborate, sophisticated, detailed knowledge of how everything fits together. And his big critique of Western culture is we don't know who we are. When
mm,
we ask the big questions, who are we? Why are we here? What are we supposed to do? We don't have any answers. So we're lost. He said,
mm,
we know. We know who we are. We know why we're here. We know what we're supposed to do. And what his answer was, we're a custodial species. We're here to take care of the ancestors and the natural spirits, and we're here to facilitate and serve. We're not here to have dominion or use up. And yeah, Christianity and capitalism, Hillman mentions that. I forget where, but he's basically saying, the idea of time as linear, the idea of growth as infinite, the idea of the self as the arbiter of all of that is antithetical to what these older traditions seem to have been saying, which is we're part of a circle, and therefore a return to the source isn't as threatening. But presumably they weren't as scared of death as we are. And I
mm.
think that's what Hillman was saying toward the end of his life is, I was reading the epilogue of in volume 3, and he's saying the big monster now is fear.
Mm, mm.
Because we're afraid of the whole thing collapsing because we've been grasping and greedily consuming and hoarding and building these towers, and now they're falling apart, and we're terrified.
Yeah. So
So
going back to
yeah,
9/11, can we what how did you put it? Snatch defeat from the jaws
yes,
of victory.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, we've been oriented toward victory in American exceptionalism. That the economy is the wealth being hoarded by the less than 1%, by the oligarchs and the technocrats, and the whole thing is to serve the distorted sense of power and control of a very small group of people. Instead of the economy is, if you read Wendell Berry, he has this amazing essay about the great economy, which is the world.
Hmm.
It's the set of relationships. That's why this Sumerian thing of we own the land and there are special royal people who control that and we have money. Then work, instead of work being part of a set of relationships, work is to generate wealth.
Yeah.
And so when the economy is doing well, it means we're destroying the environment. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's all very destructive, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just interesting to note that all of the kind of capitalistic metaphors are all about ascension, climbing the corporate ladder, getting to the top of the heap, uh, you know,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
That, and there's not really an end to that. It's imagined to be infinite, which I don't know if you want to get into this, but the fantasies of the tech billionaires are really concerning. They're using science fiction, dystopian literature as a utopian vision of what we should actually do. And a lot
Yeah.
of it seems to be based on their nihilism, their sense of there's nothing when we die. And so we need to merge with technology in order to have our consciousness become part of the cloud and reach some kind of literal immortality. I mean, it's a defense against some kind of existential nihilistic fear of death. And isn't
Yes.
that great?
I know, I know. Yeah, I wrote an essay a little while back about looking at Elon Musk and Trump through the lens of the puer senex, very much
Nice.
influenced by
Nice.
Hillman. And I mean, in Elon, we've got a perfect example of a puer who's out of control, got no boundaries whatsoever.
Yeah, it's the I just saw a quote from Hillman about boundaries. It was on the archetypal psychology or James Hillman Facebook group, and he was talking about that about the paranoid fear of borders and boundaries because there are no limits because they're not contained, they're not grounded.
Hmm.
So it's really disturbing to think that that style of consciousness is not only ruling the wealthy class, but it's also there's an essay that I ran across not too long ago. It's from the first Trump administration. It was written maybe 2018, something like that. But it's called Nihilist Nation. I think Kreiser is the author's name. I think he's an educator, but he writes as a journalist. But he's saying what people see in Trump is the one who will finally bring all this to an end because it's so miserable, it's intolerable, and it's meaningless. So one of the perks of electing someone like that is that they will destroy everything. And there's even a quote from King Lear, let the curtain come down, let it finally be done. It's saying that the nihilism that these figures represent is shared by a lot of people who no longer find life to be joyful, rewarding, or meaningful. So it's part of the collapse, but then the impulse is to hasten it.
Hmm. Yeah, accelerationism. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and isn't the ultimate boundary for the puer death? I mean,
Yes.
that's the great
Yes.
boundary that says like your life has limits.
That's right. Yeah, I wrote an essay for the Dallas Institute, one of the annual Hillman conferences. It was about Daedalus and of course Icarus, but it was
Hmm.
about King Minos and his greed and how Daedalus colluded with him to basically first he allowed King Minos's wife to seduce the bull that was Poseidon. So he essentially his technology helped create the Minotaur, and then he colluded with King Minos to create the labyrinth, and then they were feeding the young people to the bull to the Minotaur, and so I used that as sort of a template for the collusion between the technological mind and the greedy mind, and how it's death dealing,
Mm.
and that would include his own son. Daedalus's
Yeah,
son, which is Icarus,
yeah.
the
And I'm
ultimate
just thinking
poor.
about how that, we can look at Musk trying to develop rockets that'll go to Mars to escape the bounds of this
Yes,
earthly life,
yes,
and how many resources are required to do every test rocket and to do the launch and the retrieval and all of that. I mean, billions and billions of dollars, untold amounts of
Yes.
resources, natural resources, and then thinking about AI and the natural resources that that technology
The water.
consumes,
Yeah, my state of Michigan here is being pressured to make deals for our water. We have
give up your
an
water.
abundance of water. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
those Great
surrounded by the
Lakes
Great
will
Lakes.
be drained
That's, yeah, to create,
into
you
data
know,
farms. Yeah.
yep. Yeah, it starts to look a lot more like the Matrix than most people would care to dwell on.
Well, yeah, I mean that Matrix gets invoked quite often when my wife and I are like reading something about how AI is affecting young people and how people are kind of addicted to it now, and in these very
Absolutely.
strange pathological relationships with these AI entities, and it's causing AI psychosis and kind of
And
a
AI
madness all its
assisted
own, like
suicide. And
Silicon Madness is what I've been thinking of it
yeah,
as.
it's a very dark mirror. And I know that's sort of a title of a British
Black
series
Mirror,
about this
yeah.
stuff, Black
Yeah.
Mirror. But Hillman commented on this, I think more in not maybe not in writing, but he would talk about do people really think that those black screens, those devices don't want something from us? He was questioning the idea that they're tools. I mean,
Merely tools, yeah.
and what we've learned literally is that we are the product. I mean, for these social media sites, because they're free, we are the product. I mean, our data is the uh, what's being pulled out of it for the corporate
Yeah.
world.
And
Yeah,
I mean, just calling it data somehow kind of
yeah,
cleans it up or depotentiates it, right? But what it really is people's life stories, their dreams, their aspirations, their wonderings, feeding all these questions into
yes,
the AI chatbots. I mean, it's pouring your soul into the machine.
it is.
And
It's a form of theft. It is, or
yeah, but
vampirism.
it's like we're handing it over though, It's like you invite the vampire into your home and then it starts
That's
to
right.
bleed you dry.
And I think maybe that's an expression of the fear and dread that a lot of people are feeling. It's that the dissociative fantasy is welcome. The loss of awareness, the loss of presence. It takes courage to be grounded and awake and alive and present right now. And I think a lot of people are just leaning into the
Totally.
addiction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a salvational mythology, AI, because AI, if we feed it enough, it's going to
Yeah.
solve our problems and get us out of this mess, right?
Yes. Because it's smarter than we are. I mean, the fantasy is that it knows. I mean, there are lots of part of the AI psychosis is believing that they've tapped into some kind of higher consciousness or
Hmm.
some kind of God or a universal consciousness through some kind of subquantum field, which actually gets into some of the current theories of consciousness are that our brain is downloading and modifying a universal consciousness, which is interesting on its own terms. But the idea that AI is somehow using that and that it knows better than we do, it can see into the future, it knows us. It's sort of the image of Narcissus staring at his own reflection. What we're getting back is our own ideas distorted and amplified, and it just seems to go down the rabbit hole very quickly for some folks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, in kind of having this conversation, I think it was with Ed Casey, maybe, I'd asked him, like, what do you think Hillman would have thought about AI? And I think I talked to Michael Scipiora and I asked him what we should call our episode. And he said, well, thinking with Hillman, because that's what we're still doing and that's what he would want
I like that.
from us. And so I think that's kind of what we're enacting here is we're thinking with Hillman, thinking with this archetypal perspective that includes history and mythology and religion and psychology and all the whole shebang, and
Yes.
considers what's happening in the world now through that multivalent lens.
Exactly, and I think that's what's being lost in the digital world. It's the faster processing without the context. It's the horizontal information without the meaningful depth. There's a researcher at U of M. I used to do a whole series of lectures on the impact of digital technology on mental health, and a
Hmm.
lot of it was based on neuroscience, but I would sneak in some archetypal thinking here and there. But there was a research at U of M that said what we have now is learning that's a mile wide and an inch deep because it's not getting encoded into long-term memory. So our imagination has less to work with.
Hmm.
There's no raw material because we're so busy processing information that we never slow down. So, and we don't sleep as well, which is when a lot of that integration and encoding at the deep level happens apparently. So we're left with minds that are flashing along with the pace and the two-dimensionality of digital information as opposed to experiences that turn to soul making. So
Right.
it's quite frightening when you think about the neuroscience research through the lens of Hillman and archetypal psychology and imagination and soul. It's a flattening out, and it's, as you said earlier, it's a stealing away of what makes us ensouled, what makes us eventually get wiser,
Yeah.
So
And one of the ways that we can think about soul is that it is that process of digestion through reflection, through
yes,
turning things over in our mind,
yes,
testing things out through our imaginative capacity. This is what turns information into knowledge and
that's
wisdom.
right.
And people, because they don't exercise enough vigilance around taking in information, they're left with no room to digest, right? Like they're stuffed. And you probably see this in your clinical room as much as I do, that people are
Yeah,
just completely overwhelmed.
yes, yeah. Unplugging becomes a sort of desperate but meaningful act, just stepping out of
An
the stream of
intervention.
information. Yeah, it is for a lot of
Yeah.
people, especially younger folks, but even for some older people who are using it to fill a void. And to your point, when we're constantly processing information, there's a whole structure. I know this is more neuroscience, but there's a default mode network, a set of structures that only switches on when we're not busy, when we're
Hmm.
bored. And that's the source of reflection and moral sort of self-awareness. The rumination happens only if we're not busying and distracting ourselves with other things. Unless you have ADHD, in which case that structure is always turned on. And I'm definitely in that group. The commentary and the reflection never stops, so it's
Hmm.
challenging in a different way.
Is
But
that what you
yeah,
call it? ADHD. Okay.
it's actually, in that research, it's what we understand now is it's actually an attention surplus. It's an artist
Hmm.
brain that's waiting to be inspired. And then there's
Yeah.
actually a lot of attention and hyper focusing. You can think and delve and create all day long without getting too fatigued or realizing what time it is. So,
Yeah, totally. That's why I've never been able to identify myself with that diagnosis,
right.
with
It's
that
not a
pathologizing of what I feel is one of my creative superpowers.
it is a superpower. And the reason they call it attention deficit is because in the labs in the 1970s, this
They couldn't focus on what they wanted you to focus on, right?
yeah, and they didn't want to focus on the social, emotional, and imaginal strengths of it. They wanted to focus on the behavioral deficits. I mean, there was a time when it was considered a moral deficit. At one point, ADHD was called a clumsy child syndrome. There are all kinds of sort of uh, rationalistic judgments on it, and they couldn't measure the emotional piece. We're very sensitive. One of the adult symptoms of so-called ADHD is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means we get our feelings hurt really easily. But they didn't want to study that. They wanted to get people back into the classroom and more productive in their cubicles. So they defined all those other things out. But it really is an artist brain. It's a writer's brain, a painter's brain, it's a hunter's brain.
Yeah, yeah, right. And maybe it just I mean, maybe part of the pathology is that it doesn't have the right outlet to be expressed in
Exactly.
a creative way, you know?
Yeah, it's the problem isn't that you can't function in your little metal seat in school. The problem isn't that you can't crank out enough widgets on the assembly line or fill out the forms in your gray cubicle. It's those spaces to begin with. It's the fact that we're incarcerating and closing and cutting off and isolating and narrowing. I mean, that seems to be the whole point of our educational system at this
Yeah,
point
yeah.
is to move us away from all those other qualities. So if you
Yeah,
haven't, if you,
get us ready for what my fellow Canadian Douglas Copeland called in Gen X the veal fattening pens,
oh
meaning
dear,
those office cubicles, you know,
yeah,
or your tiny little clinical office in the hospital, you know, whatever, the veal
that's
fattening
right.
pen.
No, it's true. And if you haven't read Ian McGilchrist's work, he's a British psychiatrist and neuroscientist, but he's basically saying the whole culture is based on left hemisphere functioning, which is more decontextualized, more flattened, more narrow, less aware of context, less creative, less imaginative, less intuitive, less related to other people. And he has this description toward the end of his first book, which is The Master and His Emissary. And it's a description, what would a culture look like that was based almost entirely on the left hemisphere and the marginalization of the right. And it's a perfect
Look around.
description. Yeah, so we're being severed from our own source, from our own
Mm,
imaginative potential by the system constantly,
yeah.
including by all the media. It imagines for you and presents you with images that aren't your images and that aren't perceived as images. They're just information. So
Yeah.
it's quite violent.
Yeah, the post-Cartesian monotheism of rationality.
Yep.
Yeah, which I mean, let's circle back to revisioning,
Sure.
because that's one of the, you know, Hillman's great enemies is Descartes, you
Yeah.
know. And I wanted to talk to you about like when you encountered this text. It sounds like you were familiar with him for
Very
quite a long
early.
time. Yeah, very early.
I was in my
And
early 20s.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I first encountered Hillman in my 20s, you know, going through like the men's work stuff, Robert Bly
Yes.
and Michael
Yes.
Mead and that kind of thing. And he was on
Same.
the periphery. So I was like, who's this guy? I got a blue fire. And I couldn't get it. I didn't have a liberal arts background. I didn't have any real understanding of the classics, you know, all these things that
Right.
he references and brings into the work without holding your hand and telling you, you know, why he's including it or, you know, what it's
He
all
wasn't a
about.
hand holder, was he? He
Not
was.
a hand holder in that way. So it took me a lot of years to kind of come back around to him and go, ah, okay. And then saw his
Yeah.
work as a kind of a curriculum of
It
not
is.
just soul work, but also of understanding my own self as a person who comes from, you know, basically all of Western Europe, you know, this European mutt. And so what is Western culture? And
Right.
his work has really opened that up to me in a very profound way that's helped me as a person
Yes.
asking those big questions like, who am I? Where do I come from? Who do I come from? You know, how do we get here? You know?
Exactly. Yeah, I was primed for some of Hillman from my undergraduate liberal arts degree. I'd been doing an independent study on Heidegger the semester before I started grad school, so I was very much immersed in the sort of philosophical version of non-dualism. I mean, I got it conceptually, but then you start reading Hillman, and this was my point in the intro to In Human Relations. It works on you on multiple levels. I mean, you can read it for its historical and theological and philosophical references. You can read the footnotes, you can dive in, you could use it as a curriculum. But also he's writing poetically in between the literal references. I mean, he's constructing it and also deconstructing it, and he's applying it to your own experience. And I had a long period during graduate school. I mean, I was functioning as a clinical psych grad student and doing all the other courses, which don't have much to do with imagination,
Hmm.
unless you take a course on the Rorschach, which I did, and that was fun. But it was operating me on a different level, and all the things that I had compartmentalized growing up, this sort of academic thinking and the private fantasy. I mean, I read all kinds of science fiction Ray Bradbury, Dune. I had all kinds of images and stories, but I hadn't been exposed to anything that allowed me to integrate that and bring some of that to bear. And
Right,
so
you're
I had,
missing the kind of the glue.
oh, completely. And
Hmm.
so I started having dreams that were essentially initiatory, apocalyptic, bizarre, vivid. My dream life took off. There was also, I was taking a class on dreams, and when you start to invite dreams,
Hmm.
they start coming.
Totally,
So
yeah.
so
Hmm.
I had a quiet falling apart that went on for several years there, and it was very ultimately, uh, you could say healing, you could say integrating, but it just opened up all kinds of. I used to have dreams of I'm in the house I know, but there's a door, and then there's all these other rooms, and then drops in. So my psyche was integrating, but that's a Jungian way of saying it. It was more fragmenting into multiplicity,
Could we
and
say that doors were opening
you could say that.
rather than using those big words of healing, integration,
That's
which
right.
Hillman's standing over my shoulder right now going, those are
I
some of
know.
those
No,
words.
I know him. I know what James would say. But it was what I mean is it was in the service of my engaging with the world more effectively, because those kinds of initiations, when they're not guided, and this wasn't really guided, this was just my own sort of experience outside the program. I didn't want to bring too much of it in, because not all the program was depth psychology. It was clinical psych. So what I mean is it made me a better person and a better therapist, and it helped me understand my ideas better, because I understood that they were connected archetypally to many other things. But yeah, it was a falling apart, and it was definitely, the categories, the sort of meta level headings in revisioning were all happening to me all at once, personifying and psychologizing, and falling apart and dehumanizing. I mean, it was all happening all the time. And I think the reading was the container. Honestly, I think Hillman was my first really good therapist, even though he wasn't there. I hadn't met him, didn't ever expect to meet him. But I just kept reading and imagining. But it was the feeling level it was that my feelings could connect to what I was thinking about, because
Hmm.
that hadn't happened before.
Yeah, I mean, he often said that once he left his psychoanalytic practice and he went out and was just writing and lecturing and doing that kind of thing, that he was doing a therapy of ideas. So he was taking
Exactly.
ideas that were like kind of orthodox in psychology and sociology and everything, and performing putting them on the therapeutic couch and analyzing them, deconstructing them, revisioning them, etc. And I twist that because I find that his ideas are or can be therapeutic. So he's talking about
That
doing a
that is,
therapy
yeah.
on ideas, but I think also his ideas for me have been really therapeutic in, I think,
Yes.
the sense that you're speaking of, like helping me kind of understand myself better, understand where I come from, having some kind of historical background
Yes.
for this world that I was born into, and my life and my ancestry and all of it. I mean, incredibly therapeutic. Like what I was looking for is a kind of a displaced European person, like a kind of a cultural orphan, adrift at sea. Here is like this lifeboat with this
Absolutely.
incredibly likable trickster type man going, "Hey, come on in," you know.
Yeah, the trickster part of him was a lot more comfortable to me than the Saturnine Senex stuff, but both
Mm.
are necessary. I mean, his no matters as much as when he laughs at one of your jokes. I mean, the things it tells you not to do, the things it says that's not the direction, that's not quite right. Uh, that's a sort of there's something really valuable in that as well. But
Well,
yeah,
that's what makes it valuable, I'd say. There's an old idea that we talk about in men's work is that the blessing means nothing unless there's the threat of the curse as well.
that's right. I was just rewatching. I do astrology, so we could, if that's relevant to your audience, we could do that. But I was just watching Rick Tarnas go through James's birth chart, and it's parallel to stuff that I'd been thinking about. Because I wanted to look at the chart when I was writing about his life. I wanted to understand sort of on a deep level, what am I looking at here? And one of the things that Tarnas points out is something that I had been thinking about. I don't think I put it in the biography, but he has Neptune square Saturn, and he goes through that idea of the gift is also poison because in German it's capital G, Gift. And so, but he it cuts both ways. So he's saying uh, what seems to be heavy is actually a gift, but also the gift can be poisonous. So it's he was always reversing and then double reversing, and the Senex Pura is one aspect of that. But it's
Mm.
in all his ideas, it's sort of like if you're looking at it from one side, there's also another side, and then based on that, you have to go back to the there's a great line. I think it's a Zen sort of koan, but David Miller was talking at Hillman's memorial service in Manhattan a couple years after he died, and he said if you could sum it all up, Hillman's perspective, his work, it would be this saying: always pick up the cup by the other handle. So whichever one you're holding on to is not the one you should always pick it up by the other one.
Mm.
And that's disorienting, but ultimately it's not integrative, but it helps you see the complexity. How one,
Mm.
the Neptunian optimism is canceled out by Saturn's stern uh, limit setting, but also the other way around. And
Mm.
it's complicated, but that's in a lot of his work,
Yeah.
that tension.
Yeah. Like picking up the cup from the other handle in that is maybe, oh, the realization that there's another handle on the other side of this cup, and I always grab it from this one side, and I always lift it to my
Yes.
mouth the same way. So, what if I grab it with my other hand? Oh, what a different experience. Maybe I see things differently or taste things differently or,
Yeah. I do think doing therapy is one of the best ways to learn Hillman. I realize it's intellectually demanding, but I think the challenge of coming up with a method that he doesn't spell out is really valuable because there's no yes or no exactly.
Yeah, it's a perspective. And it's I've thought about this and that's what I wanted to talk with you about next
Oh,
actually is like the kind of the application of Hillman's ideas in therapy because we both, I'm a counselor, you're a therapist, and
yes.
we're both really influenced by his ideas. And one of the criticisms that I always hear of Hillman is like, well, okay, interesting ideas, but like, how do you put them into practice? He's impractical. And he would be the first one to admit that that's not his job. But I think
Yeah,
that maybe it's our job, actually, as
I think
people
it is.
who love offering this kind of service to people and
Yes.
engaging in these kind of conversations, to maybe like work our way toward articulating how that approach informs therapy. And it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I got this open Google Docs. Every time I reread his work and come across one of his little moves or maxims, I'm putting it in this doc, in
Nice.
the thought that someday maybe I'll put together a little handbook called, Archetypal Psychology in Practice. And it's just a bunch of moves and what he called kind of gizmos and gadgets and maxims, just to kind of help with that orientation and to open people to more kind of creative or different moves to make when somebody brings a presenting issue into the clinical space, you
Yeah,
know?
that's right. Yeah, I like the idea that it's like jazz, that you have to learn all the scales, but then you can improvise. And I think
Yeah.
that's when you're
Well,
improvising with
you learn the scales so that you can like let go of them.
yes.
Because if you start playing scales in jazz, people are gonna like turn up their noses and walk out, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have to learn the rules in order to break them.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of intuitive process that goes with this, and then there's a lot of reflection after the fact when you're first trying it out. One of my first experiences was with a client who had a hat on and it had a superhero logo on it. And I won't go into the details, but basically I reacted to the hat because the client had said something that reminded me of what was on the hat. And that became this many layered, it was the story of his life. And it's
Yeah.
just because I was like, oh, that's from the thing. Uh, which
Noticing.
is, yeah, it's that via negativa. It's the being comfortable in waiting for the image to arrive because it comes from the client. It's not an arbitrary. I was having a conversation with a trainee once, and it was about acceptance and commitment therapy, and they have these metaphors which are really conceptual allegories. And I was saying, well, that's not what I think of as a metaphor or an
It's not a
image.
real metaphor. There's no image there. Yeah.
It's not embedded in the situation.
Hmm.
It doesn't arrive from the language and sometimes even the invisible image. I mean, I'll be listening to somebody and say, you know that I don't know why this reminds me of this song, and
Hmm.
their eyes widen and they say that's my favorite song. So it's listening, it's listening, and then it's allowing your own ideational and imaginal process to go. But that's not an abstraction. That's not like a model or it is a move. It's a move based on the move that the client just made. It's seeing what's moving in the room, and you start to
And
realize,
dancing with it.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Taking a cue from what has arisen or what has jumped out at you.
Yes,
And just saying, what happens if we follow this? Oh my God, actually there's something there.
right. And the training in some of the more structured models can be useful for that because then you have a sense of how people get injured, where this might be coming from. You have a lot of
Hmm.
conceptual frameworks, but those aren't in play when you're listening because you're just trying to see what's there in a
Hmm.
non-literal way. And there's a lot more in the room. I remember when I was a clinical supervisor, a training director, so I was teaching doctoral interns how to do therapy, and I was trying to go, well, you just see it, and then I was realizing not everyone works that way, so I had to
Yeah.
come up with a model that could create that in a slightly more conscious and linear way. And it actually worked. I was basically creating boxes of data or information that were coming from the person's appearance or their backstory or my emotional and psychological reaction to them, as sort of transference, countertransference, and also their symptoms. And I was saying all of this, if you start to listen to it a certain way, it starts to cohere into a story, an image, a metaphor. But you have to let all that, you have to realize that the person is holographic, that what's being expressed is happening on multiple levels, but that it all kind of points in the same direction. And they kind of got it. And they said, why
Yeah.
didn't I learn this in grad school? And I was saying, well, these models aren't really taught because they're much harder to understand and initially to apply. The structured models can be taught to someone who's never done it before. But after you start to do that for a while, what you want to do is respond to what's in front of you. And what's in front of you might be a story about one of their ancestors that they hadn't thought about. But if you suddenly find yourself being pulled back in time and you say, I wonder did you have someone else it, you can follow those threads because it's all in the room. Any
Hmm.
part of their story, any part, it could be in their facial expression, it could be in their body language, it could be a feeling you have in your gut while you're listening.
Hmm.
But those are all connected. It's sort of trusting that reality is holographic, that
Hmm.
it's archetypal, that it's all interrelated. And there is a part of our mind that we're pulled away from that does that really well once we start to tune into it.
Yeah. Once we like, well, I guess, following like McGilchrist's metaphor of the left and right hemispheres, when we start
Yes.
incorporating,
Yes.
embodying more of that right-brained, intuitive Gestalt
Yes.
perspective, right? So one of the things, I mean, so Hillman in Revisioning lays out these kind of four ideas or moves or processes,
Yes.
and they're like actually a good starting point for something like a methodology, right? Like
They
here's
are.
some moves that you can make when presented with something. But I think beyond that, beyond any kind of like technical moves, what you need actually is something that you cannot teach in any school, and that's filling up this reservoir of stories and images
That's right.
from literature, mythology, religion,
Yeah.
psychology, all of it, right? And so filling up that reservoir so there's something to resonate with what's coming up in the moment, right? For that connection to be made, there has to be something to connect to. And I think our job as therapists is to be that kind of reservoir so that we can
Yes,
enrich people's narratives with these other perspectives, with these historical references or whatever, you know?
that's what made, I think, Michael Meade does still make Michael Meade so effective, is that he has so many stories available to him and he can bring them out at the right time. There's also Hillman's little essay, A Note on Story, where he says that familiarity with story is a positive prognostic indicator. It's probably the single most positive thing that the client can bring into the room, that the knowledge of how stories go, of fairy tales, of novels, just as you said, because they resonate, because there are underlying patterns. And the more of those you kind of have floating around, the more you can go, oh, that's what I was doing with the client's hat. I was, oh,
Hmm.
that sounds that's a, literally a line from the movie. So
Hmm.
the impoverishment of that in the current educational system is what we're up against. I used to say in clinical settings when I was supervising and recruiting, I would say what we're looking for is people who know culture. They have some background in the arts. They have some background in, you know, English literature, in mythology, in storytelling, and creative writing. So someone with an artist background, anything narrative, anything imaginative, because those skills are very much they're hard to teach. You can teach the details. You can teach someone how to give them MMPI or administer Rorschach, but to teach someone to listen properly and to allow that to resonate with some other story that you know, that requires, I think Hillman called it resources. There was some interview I
Mm.
was watching, might have been on your channel. Someone was saying that you know, when the younger generation that's coming into this profession doesn't have this storehouse of stories. That's what Michael Meade used to point out, is that story is where
Yeah.
things are stored. It, it's a lot harder. And so we have to catch up. We have to re-educate ourselves,
Hmm.
immerse ourselves.
Well, and I think Hillman, toward the end of his life, it was maybe during the big seminar he gave at Pacifica entitled The Art, Practice, and Philosophy of Psychotherapy. And they were talking about
Mhm.
the difference between a psychological education and a psychological training. And he was pointing out that most schools are giving a psychological training, and all you're reading is
And
psychology textbooks, none of which mention soul or imagination.
right.
And that what depth psychologists in particular, which he also said, every psychology should be a depth psychology for it to be real psychology, to speak to and from psyche, from soul.
Yes.
It is inherently got depth. Okay, but that the psychological education would be a kind of liberal arts cultural education to fill up that reservoir or
Ideally.
the storehouse. Yeah.
Because the moves when they're mechanical don't fit. If the move is part of a dance, then you know they step this way and you step this way, and there's a rhythm to it, and it starts to be more embodied. I liked the interview with Robbie Bosnack. That's, you know, he's written about that the embodiment piece probably more than other folks have, and it's really useful, especially in trauma work, which I do, to think about where are these things held in the body and how do they show up as symptoms, as sensations, but also that it can lead to a whole cathartic process or a calming moment. So
Mm.
yeah, the moves need to be rooted in the traditions, and that's where it gets really challenging if you work in a university setting, because you've got students coming in, clients, you could say, patients, citizens, but they're from all over the world. You know, the
Mm.
universities I worked in, I saw people from almost every continent where there are people. So uh, the stories you know may not be the ones that resonate with them. So you start to read in that sort of classical Jungian way, cross-culturally.
Mm.
You know, there's a book called uh, what is it called? The Hero with an African Face or something like that, or African. It's basically a Joseph Campbell style exploration of African mythology. And you just start to realize that we need to know a little bit of everything to really meet people where they are and to find the things that have that deeper resonance when you share them.
Yeah.
Because a superhero movie isn't going to get it done for some people.
Yeah, and a Disneyfied fairy tale ain't gonna do it either.
That's right.
I didn't start really working with people until I was in my 40s, and so I had a whole life before doing any
Yeah,
kind of counseling. And, in that Hillman way, looking back on my life, looking for the kind of traces of the acorn starting to show
sure.
itself, my interest in books, being a voracious reader from a preternaturally young age, my interest in other cultures, going into shamanism and yoga and all of this,
Yes.
gave me this wide-ranging education so that when people from other cultures show up in my therapy room, I often have stories in the reservoir, or I
Yep.
recognize what they're talking
Yep.
about cultural norms,
Yes.
and I can look back and go, oh, that was my education, not the training I did to learn the
No, right.
whatever, all the different
Right.
techniques and acronyms and all the rest of it.
No, it's true. And that's why you couldn't get into the Young Institute, for example, until you were about 35 years old. You weren't considered a full adult yet. The latest brain research is that adolescence continues into our early 30s. So,
Well, that's
when I
getting,
started, I was an adolescent.
yeah, well, the age is getting older and older as the culture gets more and more infantile.
That's
It
exactly
used
right.
to be you weren't fully formed until you're 24. Well, now it's 35, and 35 is the new 24, and it goes both ways.
It really does.
Ugh.
Yeah. I used to become a Senex at 40 in Rome.
Yeah, well, even when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, I remember when my parents turned 40, they had over the hill parties. Like
Yep.
that was, you've reached the peak, man. You've reached the Puer peak. Now it's all downhill,
Right.
downhill slide into senility and
What was the
decrepitude.
there was line from Orwell or somebody. It's 40 is the old age of youth and the 50 is the youth of old age, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
So we're young old men.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I like to think of myself as an elder in training,
Yeah, that's right.
trying to prepare for meeting the challenges of, people my age now, in 20 years or whatever.
Right.
And most of it is really filling up with stories and doing a lot of the deconstruction work, so I can become an old fool, you know.
Yeah, that for me, a big part of it over the years, I'd say I've been doing therapy for about 35 years,
Hmm,
is getting myself out of the way, or at least the
hmm,
part of myself that gets in the way. And in that sense, losses and traumas and humiliations and the things that happen that we didn't plan, all the things that set us off balance and that harm us seemingly, that's part of paying our dues and being seasoned. And it's everything Hellman says about the ego. That form of consciousness doesn't help very much. And so we have to know ourselves, but we also have to be radically humble and quiet the anxiety ego voice, the ambitious ego voice, the thought that says, am I helping this person or am I doing it the right way? Or would my supervisor approve? That gets in the way of the stuff that you're talking about,
hmm.
and I think life is a better teacher in that sense.
Well, call the
Saturn's
world,
gifts. Yeah,
call the world, if you will, a veil of soul making, then you'll
yeah,
know the use of the world.
that's
And by
right.
the world, we mean the world of suffering, right? And
I think
so
so.
what's suffering for? It's to make soul, would
Yeah.
be the kind of fundamental Hillman belief.
I like the poem. I forget who told it, but it was at a men's conference. But it was the chickpea jumps over the lid of the pot, and the
Yeah,
cook knocks it back in.
It's a
Rumi, yeah,
Rumi poem. Yeah.
yeah.
Not ready
You
yet.
think I'm hurting you? I'm giving you flavor.
Yeah, get back in the mix. What did Jung always say? He's like, we're in the soup together, like him and the client or the patient. It's like if you
Exactly.
can jump in the soup with the client, that goes to me, beyond unconditional positive regard, empathy, like being in the soup with the client.
Yep.
Yeah,
And letting them know that,
being in the mess.
yeah, come on in, the water's fine. Like
Yeah,
that.
we're all in kind of the same mess. I mean, my pot might have a different bunch of ingredients in it, but look, I'm not some perfected
That's
being.
right. No, we're all. I think Malcolm Samay or Michael Mead. I think it was Mead that says this, but he said the main advantage of the mentor is that he's been suffering longer.
Not that he's figured it all out, but that
No,
he
he's
somehow endured,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's what I'm talking to people all the time. It's like, look, drop this fantasy of becoming healed, because when people say I want to heal, what they're really saying is I don't want to suffer anymore.
yeah.
Meaning,
That's
I don't
right.
want to be triggered by the same old things. I don't want to feel this pain anymore. So I'm like, the sooner you can give up that fantasy and accept suffering, the better off you'll be. But then how do we endure suffering once we admit it? I think meaning is the thing that helps us to endure suffering.
Yes.
If so, something even like that maxim of, call the world, if you will, a veil of soul making, then you'll know the use of the world. So
Hmm.
that's one of those healing ideas to me, because then it says like, oh, okay, suffering is inevitable. The goal is not some Buddhist fantasy of transcending suffering, but to see it as actually something positive, in that if you're really
Yes.
experiencing suffering and going through that soul-making process of
Yes.
reflection, really allowing the suffering to transform you in some way, to inform you in some way, that you'll come out of it a more soulful person, which to me means a more
Yes.
lived in person, a person who carries some gravitas, a person who has something to offer, like Malidoma
Yes.
Some's idea of the mentor.
Yes. So two images came to mind. One is Hecate, who is standing there watching when Kore Persephone is being abducted, and she's just watching and witnessing and knowing that that's necessary and that this is the way it goes.
Hmm.
That's one. The other, well, same story but different figure. Balbo comes to Demeter and starts doing this ridiculous dance where she's lifting up her dress. It's kind of sexualized, and she makes Demeter laugh, and that's when Demeter relents and allows the spring to return. And that's what resolves the
Hmm.
story in that version of the myth, is that Balbo is this old, very much a crone figure, but she's joyfully saying, "Look, this isn't the end. There's another rebirth. There's another youthful energy that returns after you've lost. There's so it's that deep
Hmm. And
wisdom."
lifting up her skirt, like showing her vulva, like a Sheila
Yes,
Nagig,
yes,
maybe.
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. And I'm sure those stories are somehow
Hmm.
related through time and space, right? They probably inform each other. A lot of the fairy tales came from Middle East, so yeah, there's a lot of cross-pollination. But yeah, I think eventually there's a part of us that knows. Oh, here's another one. Michael Mead told this story of the Princess Vasilisa. And there's a hunter and the firebird, and he finds the feather and brings it back to the king. Eventually, the king says, "Throw the hunter into the boiling vat,"
Hmm.
and so he'll to get rid of him because he sees him as a threat to marrying Vasilisa. So his horse of power says to him, "When they come to get you, don't allow them to throw you in, jump in. You need to jump into the boiling water." And when he does that, he comes back out looking, I think he goes down a few times, two or three times. And when he comes out, he looks polished and beautiful and better than he was
Probably,
before.
probably three times.
Most
If it's a
likely
legit
three.
fairy tale, it's probably three times. Like,
It's three. But that idea of jumping in intentionally, that there's a part of
hmm.
you, the horse or the crone or some wiser part of you.
Right, the horse, the animal instinct, maybe.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, being cooked is
That knows, hey, look,
necessary.
you're better off jumping in the pot,
Yeah,
jumping into the soup.
resisting, it's like putting your feet in a cold swimming pool. It's like, yeah, just jump in.
Yeah, resistance, or the more kind of passive denial, or escapism through, yeah,
Yeah.
transcendence, which is a big theme these days.
Yeah,
Do you want to get into the nitty gritty of personifying, pathologizing, psychologizing, dehumanizing? I mean, or is that
in
too big of a
therapy,
topic to cover
it's
now?
it's big, but we can do it. Personifying.
What I would
Oh, sorry.
like,
Yeah,
what I would
yeah. What
like,
do you want to do?
because I've done a deep dive with Glenn Slater on revisioning that people can go back and listen to. But Glenn's not a practitioner. He's a scholar and a teacher, and he knows the shit inside and out. But
He does.
he's never put it into practice in a therapy room, right? And so, what I was hoping with you as a practitioner is like maybe just give people an inkling. We don't have to go into it in totally in depth, but like,
Sure.
what does personifying look like in everyday therapy or pathologizing, psychologizing, dehumanizing, just to kind of ground it for people in real practice that they can understand and relate to? Tell me if
So
it's too big of an ask.
no, no, it's not. I've like I said, I've taught this, so I've had to think about how to teach it because
Yeah.
it's not immediately obvious. What I think of is, in a literal sense, inviting dreams as the therapist. Your dreams full of people that aren't you. Robbie Bosnick used to tell this story about he's having a lucid dream, and the taxi drives up and the driver rolls down the window, and he says, "This is my dream, so you have to take me where I want to go." And the driver just looks at him, rolls up the window, and drives off. So it was a reminder within the lucid dream, you're not in charge here, even when you
Right.
think you are. And there are all these figures. If you really open up to it, and it happens in falling apart experiences, it happens in initiation and trauma and loss. Your dreams take over, and the inner world, the imaginal world, is populated by figures and creatures and places that you don't understand, don't control
Disembodied voices.
completely. So it happens through symptoms, but it also happens in everyday language, and the tension that people feel, the approach avoidance. For example, a part of me wants this, and a lot of this has found its way into the lexicon, sort of Jungian, the multiplicity, the idea that we have competing parts of ourselves.
Yeah, or internal family systems, which,
Yes.
yeah, systematized approach, which
Yeah, that's come under
rankles me.
criticism. Yeah, it's that model's been criticized recently.
Oh, good. I'm not the only one.
No.
Because I felt, again, like a lone wolf in the wilderness going, I'm not so sure about this.
Yeah, I used to talk about I think I might have put this in a post in one of your other interviews, but basically Tom Robbins has this quote about how originally in the waters of the soul, the fish of the soul would swim around in the early religions, and they were places where you could soulfully explore, and then eventually they started to turn into fish farms, and so from Seoul to frozen fish sticks is a short trip or something like that. That the things get when things get systematized, when religion got
Right.
institutionalized,
You go
when
from the
Jung,
ocean to a cultivated fish farm, and then
yep,
I would say you maybe go to a goldfish bowl with one lonely fish swimming around in its own shit,
exactly,
subsisting on powdered worms.
seriously, if you read The Lament of
All
the
right, so
Dead was
personifying. I'm going to keep us on track here,
oh
okay?
I'm
My
there.
Senex is showing up.
No, 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 that's where I'm going. So Sonu Shamdasani and James Hillman were talking about the Red Book, and they were talking about how Jung didn't want to
In
share the Red
Lament of the
Book.
Dead.
Lament of the Dead.
Oh, such a good book. Yeah.
That's amazing. But in their discussion of it, they're saying essentially Jung, in not sharing his spontaneous process of personification, that's how his psychotic or falling apart initiation happened. All these voices, all these figures, and he spoke to them, he responded to them. He did not want his experience, even though he wrote that into the Red Book, he did not want that to be the theory. So he came up with this conceptual model, and that ironically, paradoxically, tragically, the map became the territory. And so people stopped engaging with
Right.
their own images because they're looking for the shadow, or they're looking for the anima, or they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my big critique of infernal family systems, is that you've got these predetermined labels, and then you hunt around in the psyche looking for someone to slap that label onto, and then you're kind of done with that figure. Like what Hillman would say, if you interpret a dream,
Yes.
then you're kind of done with it. It's Captain Ego's way of moving
Yes.
on. Yeah.
But so in internal tensions and in the spontaneous metaphors that clients generate, if we slow that down enough and start to be curious about that, even if it's a cliche, even if it's a sort of dead metaphor, they can be full of lively significance. They can radically decentralize the ego. They can express a symptom that you didn't even realize that offhand remark you just made. I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall. Oh, now we have an image. What does the wall look like?
Hmm.
What's it made of? How tall is it?
Are you
Treating
trying to
everyday
smash your head
speech.
open, or are you trying to break through the wall?
Is there a door?
Hmm.
Or is
Yeah.
it just,
Are
is
you
it
are you missing the door right there?
right? Or is it only 10 feet wide and you could walk around it?
Yeah.
Who built it?
Yeah.
What's it for? So
Hmm.
it's in slowing down. Every moment in the therapy could lead to something like that. And there are lots of internal dialogues happening that you can get curious about. And that becomes personified pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Just the idea that your symptoms might be from a form of consciousness that wants you to slow down. If you're depressed, maybe there's a reason for that. If you're anxious, there's a reason for that. And that you start to invite, I mean, you can do it formally. You can say, what does that part of you look like? How old do you think you were? You can do it developmentally. You can say, that kind of sounds like something a teenager would say. Is that when you first started to feel that way? You can guide it, you can structure it, but you can also just kind of elicit implicit metaphors, even if it's just a physical symptom. Like the idea is if you resonate properly, your stomach clenching could help you could realize you stopped breathing because you were empathically attuned to the client. And then you can say, I'm feeling this tension here. Do you feel that? And then that becomes a way into a metaphor, an image, and the personified world of whatever's really going on,
Hmm.
whatever more deeply going on.
Yeah. Um, I think like what you said about slowing down, even if it appears like a dead metaphor, something like that, right? I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
really useful because people come into therapy with all of these ideas kind of preloaded, conditioned. So they could come in and say, I had a dream and my anima showed up and she told me to do this and that and this. I go, okay, well, let's just like stick with the image, as Hillman would say, being like a key
yep,
rule of thumb. What did this figure look like? And so you stick with it and you start to inquire, and it may realize it may dissolve that label of anima, and that figure may be someone else, you know?
yes,
So that slowing down, sticking with it. And I think like also our role as archetypal therapists, let's say,
hmm
is to come with that reservoir and to offer some suggestions that come to mind, right? Associations, like you said, I ask this question all the time, like, how old does that voice sound to you?
yep,
Not how old are you but how old does that voice sound
yes,
to you? Oh, it sounds like a defiant teenager. And then, okay, let's get to know that defiant teenager. What is that defiant teenager protesting against? Like what do they want and things like that. So we can kind of help along the
yes.
process of getting to know these figures without slapping labels on them, which would be a wrong move to make in my book.
Yeah, that if anyone's heard the discussion that he does it in more than one place, but the idea that you dream of a snake and then the Jungian interpretation goes in a specific direction, you've killed the snake.
Right. Black snake, mother.
Yeah,
Right.
the interpretation stops it from being a live image and turns it into a concept very quickly. And
Mhm.
so early on, if people bring dreams, I just say that's an amazing dream and we should let it sit for a while. And you might want to draw it, or you could write it down, or just be open to another one. But it's kind of like, I think Hillman said this too. But it's like if a kid brings you a picture that they drew, you don't tell them. about the picture, you put it up on the fridge, you celebrate it.
Hmm.
And so,
Or you ask about it. You go,
yep,
oh, what's this horse doing on top of the barn? Or,
yep,
whatever. Why are there
yeah,
two suns?
yeah. But
Hmm.
in trauma work too, there's a very subtle process of shifting between dissociative states. And so, uh, people, it doesn't have to be literal dissociative identity. It can just be uh, a different form of consciousness, a different emotional state, a different ego state. And they happen more often than people realize, whether it's trauma or not. So listening, kind of like you're listening to music, that there's another voice there. There's a harmony or a dissonance. You start to track the new person that's shown up through the tone and force of what they're saying, or the hesitancy, or the stuttering, or there's subtle tangible cues that the person's entered into a different imaginal state, into a different personified figure. And you can start to get people just curious about that.
Yeah, right. And I think that's one of the things that's so helpful and applicable about Hillman's conception of the archetypes as being modes of consciousness.
Yes.
Because then it's not, I mean, you're not disassociated then, actually. You may
Right.
be disassociated from your persona, your kind of accepted ego
Yes.
personality, but you're actually associated with Athena or Ares or Yemanja or
Mhm.
whoever may be the reference or the referent. And then you can have a whole nother conversation that is really not pathologizing in the negative
In a
sense.
negative, right. Right.
Yeah, but like hearing the suffering as maybe a cry of the soul coming through this particular archetypal expression of anger or longing or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think that's where Hillman's stick to the image and the essays in the early 80s about image sense, that he got tired of symbols. Sometimes symbols are helpful. Sometimes it's helpful for the person to know that what they just experienced, even though it's bizarre and unsettling, there's a way to make sense of that resonates with other people. Because sometimes people want to know that they're not losing it. So
Hmm.
symbols can help with that, to say, oh, this sounds like what this person calls the anima. But other times you just get very specific and just say, let's not try to figure out what it is. Let's listen to it. The conversation in healing fiction where the woman is having a imaginal dialogue with a young man who's in a jail cell, and she's asking him all these questions and he's shutting down, and he says, I just want you to listen to me, essentially. And so you get very specific about being receptive to it.
Mm.
And then it's not, you don't have to bring up the superhero or the myth or the symbol. You can just describe and relate. And as Bosnak would do, Bosnak wants to get into embodying the image. He wants to say, how can you
Mm.
access that? How can you become the bear that's chasing you?
Mm. Yeah,
There's
yeah.
one in one of his books, this hulking figure comes up and picks up the man, and he's running with him, and he's terrified, but he gets the man into the body of this big uh,
Yeah.
figure that's
I
carrying
just wouldn't
him.
want that to turn into one of those kind of orthodox moves. That is like one of many moves you could make is to try embodying it, see what happens. Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
that's a more structured approach, but it would
yeah.
be specific to the feeling. It's not conceptual in the sense that you're trying to feel what it might be like to be that. So, but that's the whole point, is whether you're starting with a symptom or a figure of speech or a story or uh, a physical sensation, you want to allow that to expand and take up room, and understand that it has something to say, that it has value other than
Yeah.
just as something compensatory, that actually just allowing that to happen starts to move you out of your whatever the stuck space you're in.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think, like one of the ways I approach the inner voices and figures is taking that, the beautiful idea of like that Rogerian approach, unconditional positive regard, empathic listening,
Yep.
honoring, right? Like kind of value, and applying that to all these inner figures and inner voices. So you're kind of doing that humanistic psychotherapy with these figures, like
Yes.
really being interested in kind of feeling that erotic connection to whoever may be presenting in that moment.
Yeah. A lot of times it's also it's an energy that the person hasn't explored. It's
Hmm.
experiences that they've repressed. It's a
What they're
needed
afraid of.
or that they're terrified of. Yeah.
Yeah.
The tough one is identifying with the aggressor. For folks who are recovering from scary or traumatic experiences, it's realizing that there's a part of you that's angry
Hmm.
and sort of making room for that. Because at
Yeah.
first it feels like you're becoming the person who hurt you,
Hmm.
whether that's imaginal or just emotionally, but making room for that and realizing that that can take a different form and that that can be something that protects you and not just that can harm other people.
Yeah, and I think that that goes back to our idea of like a real psychotherapy education rather than training, is that in order
Yeah.
to go there with someone to get in that particular pot of soup, you have to have explored that side of yourself, So you'd have to
Yeah.
have done your shadow work.
Yeah. That's Jung. It's not what you know, it's who you are, who you become.
Mm.
And I think you do. You have to take that part of it very seriously. That'd be one of my criticisms of programs that don't encourage the therapist in training to get therapy. It's possible to completely leapfrog your own issues, your own
Mm. I don't know if therapy will
experience.
even do it the way that most therapy is practiced, though. I would say like
Yeah.
you gotta do a
Fair.
bunch of
Yeah.
sweat lodges. You gotta go
Yeah.
drink ayahuasca. You gotta do some mushroom trip. You gotta do things that break through all of your
Yeah.
defenses.
Yeah. Where I feel it is when I'm trying to refer somebody or I'll see a client and they have a partner and trying to find a good therapist, quote unquote,
Dude, this is such a problem finding referrals. Yeah,
because it's becoming more scarce. I mean, I would say when I
yeah.
entered grad school in 1989, the trend was already moving toward short-term models, solution-focused cognitive behavioral therapy,
And now it's
the
just through the roof.
the symptom reduction models, the problem-solving models. That it's
The
so
alphabet
the
soup therapies.
yeah, now it's sort of a skill set. So you learn EMDR, but you don't learn a broad integrative perspective. You learn a technique, but not a way
Yeah.
of seeing structure, seeing what's in front of
You
you.
learn
And
sets of tools.
exactly, tools rather than perspectives.
Yeah.
So it's becoming it's a little scary. But as you said, the rise in interest in these other forms of healing, these other forms of psychological development are older and a lot of times more effective.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, like what I point out to
so
people is like, what do you think we did for all of humanity, before 130 years of psychotherapy? People like Hillman points out, people read novels, and then I add, well, they did a ritual, they did spiritual
yeah,
practice,
they did.
they danced, they sang, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, somehow we survived without psychotherapy for a long time.
Yeah, that's one of the things I appreciate about, say, Peter Levine. You know, he was a biologist and he was doing a retread as a therapist, and the person's looking a certain way, and he says, "There's a tiger chasing you," and she does a full body shudder, and he didn't know why he said that, by the way,
Hmm.
but that he suddenly realized, oh, that's what the when I was a biologist in the field, that's what the antelope would look like when the tiger went away, and it stands up and shakes, and
Yeah.
so he was using his biological training, but then he did that next step. He started talking to indigenous people and started to learn about soul retrieval. And he's saying what the animals are doing, what we're trying to do in therapy, and what these older shamanic traditions are doing are essentially the same thing. You can use different language, but all are trying to create a space where we can release the
I think the
fear.
thing that he misses, and one of my critiques of him, is we're not antelopes and we're
No,
not indigenous people.
that's
One of the
true.
things that kind of that reductive view of indigenous healing leaves out the whole cultural history, the whole cultural
Yes,
milieu that people grow up in with stories, etc.,
yes,
relationships, aunties and uncles around, all of that stuff, and it gets distilled down into some shamanic
right.
healing or something like
And it's
that.
not to say that we can access that. It's just to say there are, if you just look a little
Yeah.
bit, you realize that people have been dealing with life for a long time in lots of different ways. But
Yeah.
that's the complexity of multicultural awareness, is that, it turns into appropriation really quickly. So
Hmm.
that's
But
not
one
the
of the
idea.
things, when I was doing my counseling diploma, we did a module on, well, I guess multicultural perspectives, something like that. And there's a lot of kind of social justice, identity, politics
Hmm.
interwoven into it. And reading through it, I thought, well, gosh, this isn't really like a problem for me. And what I realized is that my interest in all these other cultures, for decades, kind of naturally brought me into a place of what is called cultural humility.
Hmm.
Not seeing my culture as the be all end all, and white supremacy and all, Western
Right,
superiority and all of that stuff that had
right.
been done away with a long time ago. And so I think that's again part of like, well, how do we get there? Do we get there with kind of
Hmm.
identity politic theory or gender theory or whatever it is, or do we get there through a cultural education and cross-cultural education?
I think it comes from encounters. I do. I think
Yeah.
it comes from, you know, my paternal grandmother was an anthropology, sociology professor, and she did a lot of
She must
immersive
have had a
stuff and
cool
travel.
library.
She did. She did. That's where it started for me, was probably her stuff, I would say. That's where I
Hmm.
started to think, oh, you could study this, you could do something interesting, authentic. But she just liked being around people who weren't uh, lost in the culture that she grew up in
Yeah.
Western Michigan. She got radicalized when she was an undergraduate. Her boyfriend later became the vice presidential running mate for Norman Thomas in the National Socialist Labor Party. So she
Oh,
got
okay.
pretty radicalized pretty early. But she was authentic about it. It was because she liked the experiences she had with people from other cultures. She
Hmm.
traveled to Haiti, not as a missionary, not as a problem solver. Just she wanted to be there and she wanted to get to know people. So yeah, I think it comes through dialogue
Hmm.
and genuine interest and, like you said, humility. It starts with knowing that your own culture is messed up.
Well, I
It
think,
starts.
for me, I don't know if it started there. It started just with an interest,
Yeah, sure. That
that
works
that
too.
pulled me out of my culture and dominant culture.
No, that's good.
It was Eros that brought me out of it, not.
Right. And yeah, I guess that's what I mean about her experience. It was more
Yeah,
about
that's what I got the
love
sense
than
of. Yeah.
than intellectualization. But
Yeah.
but yeah, and I do think we learn about just how problematic white, patriarchal, cisgender,
Yeah.
straight,
Go down the list. Come on.
narrow. It gets tiring, actually, because it's so limiting.
Yeah.
It's so constraining. And that's why I liked White Supremacy as an essay of Hillman's. It's just
Hmm.
white casts its own white shadow. And yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
Yes,
one.
it does.
Hmm. Yeah. I
I
think I
had a
clipped.
conversation once. I had a prospective postdoc for a program I was in, and we were talking that she identified as Native American, and she was from the East Coast, but she had been out west, and she was talking about how it was difficult to be even marginally accepted in the culture that she was trying to help. I think this was sort of like a predoctoral internship or something, but she was on a reservation, and they were saying, "You're not part of us. You can be here."
Hmm.
But what we're talking about is just if you start to get curious about the complexity of the world that people are actually in, that it's a mirror of the world we're actually in, but we've forgotten, we're blind to it. But we're saying, the transference becomes a lot less important when the ancestors are in the room. That the personhood of the clinician is much less important to the client when they're also talking to the dead.
Hmm.
And that's a radically decentering move for psychotherapy. And so, like, if we paid attention to what else is in the room, we wouldn't be so narcissistic about it. We wouldn't be so inflated about the
Yeah.
transference reaction.
Yeah.
It's about those other relationships. It's about the embeddedness in the invisible
Totally.
world. So it's all of that is to say we can get there, but we have to do it authentically through our own tradition. You have to engage with your own ancestors.
Yeah.
you know,
You got to reckon with your whole cultural inheritance
the whole
and your
thing.
ancestors,
Oh
the
yeah.
mess of it too, not just the ancestors who
Oh
you
no, the
really
mess.
want to
I
claim.
had an ancestor on the Mayflower, and yesterday we were talking about that at home with the kids. You know, this is a complex legacy.
Yeah, and I'll just point listeners and maybe yourself too to Mary Watkins' new book,
Oh
Light
yeah,
Work: Reparative Genealogy,
I've
on
met
her
Mary. I've talked to her.
reckoning with
Yeah,
her own ancestors.
yeah, she's great. She's great.
Yeah, I love her.
You have to look
Uh,
back. That's right.
yeah, yeah. Okay, look, I'm moving us ahead now. I'm keeping us on track. Pathologizing. Now, this is a tough one for people, and
Yep.
it's a I don't know how to say it, but it's a complicated Hillman's approach to pathology because he likes to play with language and he likes to repurpose language, right, and twist it.
He
So that's
does.
what's going on here. I mean, with a lot of them, but with pathologizing particularly.
Yeah, he's reacting to the sort of Thomas Zaj perspective that pathology comes from the the oppressions of the culture. He's saying that the psyche is inherently pathological, that these images can be grotesque.
Let's just break it down for people.
Sure.
Pathology, pathos, suffering.
Yes.
So the psyche is naturally creating suffering.
Yes. It's in
Yeah.
its nature that these myths are strange, that the divine presents itself in overwhelmingly distorted and overwhelming forms. It's too much. You know, there's a book on trauma that Hillman's Spring Publications put out about trauma, and it's about the Medusa. It's the overwhelming gaze of the other, the adult when we're a child, the abuser. The face is too much. So yeah, pathology is not something that can be transcended. It's a much more at first it seems cynical. At first it seems pessimistic. It seems to be celebrating or ignoring the pain that goes with that. But
Right.
I think it holds a lot of weight when the person you're working, like we'll take it back to therapy. If someone is coming in with chronic pain, if someone is coming in with something that's intractable, a permanent loss, certain kinds of trauma that don't just fade away, there's an acknowledgement that we have to learn how to bear this, that we have to find the pockets within it. You know, there's a book called The Alchemy of Illness by someone named Kat Duff, and she's talking about chronic fatigue
Mhm.
and how she found space within that for what Hillman would call soul making. You know, that
Mhm.
the when when we stop resisting, when we surrender, but not in some kind of religious way, just in the sense of I'm going to have to make room for this. I've had
Mhm.
clients with chronic migraines, just relentless, take you out of your everyday life kinds of pain. And there are psychological, emotional equivalents of that. There are things that just are with us. And so I think he was trying to rescue in part the, you know, the meaning within the symptom,
Mhm. Or the message
the
in the symptom.
message,
Mhm.
but it's the tragic side of life, I think, that he was trying to acknowledge. You know,
Mhm.
that therapy is not salvific. It
Mhm.
doesn't fix everything.
Yeah.
It's sometimes enough to be able to understand it differently or to find the space within it to maneuver because it can be it's sort of like mindful awareness, you know, that we're aware of the pain, but we're not dominated by it.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta get this dog out. She's at my feet and she's really distracting me. Oh,
It's,
sorry.
no, if we're just I'm just glad my dogs aren't here because we would never be able to accomplish anything.
One sec. Yeah, sorry. I just realized it's getting to be about time that we usually go out for an afternoon walk, and this dog
Yeah.
loves her schedule.
Oh no, I that's why they're good for us because they remind us that
she's
Something
got a
exists
little,
below our heads.
yeah, she's got a little bone now, so that'll keep her occupied
Okay.
so we can get through the
Yeah.
next two ideas. But like, let's just jump back into pathologizing if there's
Sure.
anything else maybe you want to say to finish up on that.
Well, I think it makes room for the experiences that people think are signs of weakness, signs of brokenness, signs of failure.
Hmm.
Especially male identified clients, there's a huge pressure to be normal, to be strong, to be together, to be on top of things, to be successful. And I think pathologizing says there's no there's an irreality to that. There's a distorted, oppressive, crushing force. I grew up in Central Ohio where everyone has to be the same. So that was my experience. Forgive me, Central Ohio. But but the normalizing and success oriented cultural lies are they fall away when you realize suffering is built in. I think of Rafael Lopez Pedraza's essay on failure. I don't know if you've read that. There's a poem
Mm-mm.
in there by Rafael Cadenas, and it's all in translation for me because I don't read Spanish. But essentially, it's an ode to failure. It's saying thank you for saving me from the things I thought I wanted. You kept my feet on the ground. You kept me off the wrong path. The value of the pathology, the dark side, the shadow, everything that happens when we were making other plans. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's because we cast those things into an even worse place when we're trying to contrast them with what we think should have happened if we were smart enough, strong enough, wise enough, lucky enough.
Mm-hmm.
Life, especially right now. I mean, what's going on right now, the pathologies in the world. I mean, it's on display full time. The world is falling apart, and I think locating ourselves within that our suffering is sort of a sign of nobility
Mm-hmm.
or just the willingness to pay attention. There's that line from Franny and Zoe, the Salinger story, uh, where the older brother is saying, "This is Kali Yuga, buddy, the Iron Age. Anyone over 16 who doesn't have an ulcer is a goddamn spy." So your
I'm
symptom, yeah,
yeah,
and Hillman quoted that in Revisioning Psychology. I mean,
mm,
that line is in there, and it's in my symptom is my soul.
mm,
So the world is this way, and so in order to be in it, I have to partake in some of the distortions and injuries and disappointments and setbacks and the pain and
mm.
the suffering.
Yeah, I mean, just recognizing that one of your gifts is your ability to be a reservoir of quotes. I mean,
I'm a Gemini.
you got them there, man.
I'm, I'm,
It's good.
I'm a ninth house Gemini, so I find little bits of information quite meaningful.
Yeah, no, I dig it too. I just don't have them to access. I don't have them on my mental Rolodex like that. That's great though. Um,
It gets annoying
yeah,
sometimes. It's charming for about an hour, and then it starts.
how many times are you gonna quote somebody? Geez, like
Come up with your own ideas.
trying to justify your existence or what, buddy?
I
Um,
know
but
they're
like
just there. Yeah.
one of the great things about revisioning is that each of these big ideas, like pathologizing, is also he's also got the kind of the alternative title, right? So this is pathologizing or falling apart,
Yes.
and yeah,
Yes.
everything that you're speaking to, I think, is the essence of that, allowing yourself to fall apart. And when I think of falling apart, I'm thinking about like when you're talking about that kind of Ohioan myth of the male, the ideal male, like allowing that dominant myth to fall apart and be deconstructed
Hmm.
so that you, who you are as an individual, can emerge out of the rubble.
Yeah. You fall apart if you're lucky.
Yeah.
You you have to be saved from your plans, and you have to be saved from the identity that's been foisted on you. You have to be saved from expectations and all the ridiculous capitalist patriarchal cis white
Mm.
straight
I
mess.
think,
You have to be saved from that by the falling apart. Because otherwise your
yeah.
ego, the worst thing that can happen is if you're so-called successful, because then you've lived a life that's barren, it's not authentic, and
Yeah, your
that's
dominant
that's
myth never
worse.
gets challenged.
That's worse.
It
That's
only
much more
gets reaffirmed that, yeah, I am the
exactly.
chosen one. Like, there's something to it as well. Like, this is another one of those therapeutic ideas because if you don't have that perspective that it's necessary to suffer and to be broken apart, to be deconstructed, you're not going to ever you're not going to like hear the call to adventure to become who you really are, you know.
That's right.
And I think about someone like, I was talking with someone about Jordan Peterson the other day, how I had such hopes when he had his collapse. He had like a mental and physical breakdown. I
He
thought
did.
maybe this will be the thing that allows him just to be another guy, you know, a brilliant guy in many ways, but to
Mhm.
kind of lose that aura of savior and messiah that he carried. And
Yeah.
it didn't work. He just got
Mhm.
back to business as usual. And I thought, God, what a missed opportunity for this guy to really fall apart
So
and
now
to,
we've offended all the Buckeyes and the Jordan Peterson followers, but I agree with you. Our character
yeah.
armor doesn't easily fall away sometimes. It's probably there for a reason. But
But
that
like you said, success can really help prop up that structure, right?
I think success is one of the worst things that can happen when it's not reflected, when it's not, you know, successfully becoming ourselves, success on others' terms, on the terms defined by the system, which, as we were saying earlier, is insanely broken. It's completely misguided. It's not sustainable. It's false. It's oppressive. It's death dealing.
Hmm.
I think at its heart, this pathologizing is about the ego dying. I think that can sound melodramatic, but I think the worst form of falling apart is the best because your ego just sort of gets, and you can cooperate with this, so it works best when we cooperate, but the falling apart is experienced as a free fall into nothingness. It's a falling apart of everything that we thought was true and good and valuable about ourselves. And it's only afterwards that we start to discover, there's that Jung quote at the end of Hillman's essay on betrayal, where he's saying you discover what sustains you when nothing else did. You fall all the
Hmm.
way. And I've been telling people, if once you reach rock bottom, you just sort of build a house there, because that's your place where you stand. You discover that after that you as you thought you were is no longer here, but this is where you live, and this is where you discover your authentic self, whatever that might be, and all
Hmm.
the other figures that live in that world with you.
Hmm.
That's the best part. I have dreams now. For years, I've had dreams where I don't exist in the dream. I'm an observing presence, and all kinds of important things are happening, but they're not really happening to me. I'm just sort
Not
of,
about you. Yeah.
it's not, I don't even exist there. I mean, that's not all of them, but increasingly, I think when you get over yourself, all these other interesting parts of the psyche, the world, which is the same thing, uh, are they're of great value because you're learning more and more about the things that aren't you.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like, well, and you don't dissolve the ego, you don't kill the ego, but maybe the ego just becomes like the bus driver in in a raucous bus full of all
Sure,
interesting characters, you know.
sure. Or like Hillman said in Dream of the Underworld, that it's an imaginal ego is at home in the dark.
Mm,
Moving
yeah.
among images is one of them. The ego comes to know itself as an image.
Hmm.
And so then it's not that we walk around without a sense of self, but we take that imagistically, and it becomes a lot more
Yeah.
flexible. You
Yeah.
have a lot lower center of gravity when you know that you're in the underworld. you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Another way I think of it is you go from like the heroic ego to the humble ego. It's just
Yes.
like then the ego is what a Jungian way to put it would be relativized,
Yes.
decentralized, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's great. I like the kind of empathy and compassion that you bring to these things too, because yeah, it can sound pretty harsh, the way Hillman comes across, but that's part of his like his martial attitude he takes because he's looking to take down these sacred cows, and so he's got to go at it with that Mars ferocity in a way. He's got to like make an enemy and go after it, right?
It's true, especially in his writing and public speaking. In his, I keep going to astrology, but in his birth chart, Rick Tarnas didn't put Chiron into the picture, but Chiron is conjunct. It's in the same conjunction with Hillman's moon
And
and sun
Chiron
in
is like
Aries.
an asteroid or something, right?
Yeah, it's an asteroid and it's the wounded healer. It's the centaur that tried to stop the battle and got poisoned by an arrow, but he's immortal, so he can't die, but the wound will never heal. So he becomes
Mhm.
in the mythology, he becomes the first or an earlier version of sort of a Christ figure. He learns medicine, he heals others, and it's his own woundedness that becomes the source of that wisdom. So that's what Hillman is talking about in Suicide in the Soul, where he's saying the wound and the eye are one and the same, that our vision, our insight comes through the woundedness. It's not in the healing of our wounds, it's in the opening of an unhealable wound that our compassion flows. It's that kind
Mhm.
of perspective. Yeah, I think empathy and imagination for me are almost the same thing. They come hand in
Totally.
hand.
You
Like
need
if you,
imagination to empathize,
yes, and
to
you
put
need
yourself in
empathy.
another person's shoes, and
Yes.
yeah,
And you need empathy to truly imagine, because big part of what you're tuning into is experienced in the emotional body. It's it comes with its own pathos, its own pain, its own. So
yeah.
yeah, I think
That's why I
it's
think literature is necessary if you want to really show up authentically and be empathic with people. You have
yes,
to have walked a million miles in a million pair of moccasins, you know?
yes, and through the dark and on our knees. So
Yeah.
it's I was on internship at Notre Dame, and we were in a discussion group with some priests, and they were saying, "Isn't it remarkable what you do, you therapists? You sit with other people's pain, and you suffer with them." And I was thinking, "Oh, that's crazy."
Yeah. No,
That is
actually,
what
no.
we're
We've
doing.
got better boundaries than that. Sorry. That would be crazy.
But there's something, and clients talk about this. I'm sure yours do too. That why do you do this work? Why would you? How can you sit with this in an actual empathic way, not just sympathetic and detached, but actually, be in it? And there's something uh, energizing about it when
Look,
when it's an exchange, when it's back
yeah.
and forth between the two people.
And it's also, there's something nourishing about being in the real with
Yes,
people, whether that's joy
yes,
or pain. It's
yes.
real. And God, my soul craves that, you
I
know?
can't have this is a problem, but also a relief. I can't be in everyday conversations very well anymore
It's
because
so
they don't
hard. The
feel real.
superficial
They no,
conversations.
they no longer feel what you're calling real.
Yeah.
Because they're lacking. A lot of times I'll be talking to some out in the world. My window is that way. I'm out in the world and I'm talking about something, and I realize this is not what we should be talking about,
I know.
because I'm picking up on three other things, and I know we're never going to talk about them. This is a stranger, but I can tell they're feeling this or that.
Yeah.
And I just find that frustrating, but also tragically disappointing that here we are on this planet for a short time, and there's this encounter, and we could be talking about the real thing. I mean, in the first volume of the biography, Hillman's in Dublin for his undergrad, and he said people when they greeted each other on the street would say anything strange. They wouldn't say "Have a nice day." They would invite the weirdest thing that happened to that person.
Yeah. Come on. Feed me.
Anything strange. So I do think it's sort of it's why it's not selfless to do this work.
Hmm.
It's because it's fully alive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anyone who comes to see me in particular, because they know I'm not going to just be a kind of affirmational, technical therapist, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
They come because their soul longs for a deep and rich encounter with another soul.
exactly.
And
And
so
that
does mine. That's
includes,
why I do the work.
yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Staying on track. Look, I'm being Senex today. Um,
It's so linear.
time. We're under the
You know,
pressures of time.
I don't believe in clock time, but yes,
Yeah, sure. You're beyond that.
I just don't
You've
track it.
transcended clock time.
It's no, it's ADHD. I have time blindness. I know it's dark outside.
We can work on that. Okay,
You want to do dehumanizing?
psychologizing
Psychologizing. Yeah.
or seeing through. I forget who I was talking to recently. It might have been Ben Sells, and we were kind of going through some of
I know
this.
Ben. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was saying, this psychologizing thing, I'm not sure I get that one still, the seeing through. But I mean, we've been kind of psychologizing, seeing through from the get-go in this
We have.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been
Seeing through.
demonstrating it. So just kind of lay
Yeah.
it out for people, if you would.
So I want to touch on the astrology. Hillman had Pluto in Cancer in the 12th house. It was near the ascendant. So he greeted the world with this plutonic energy, which is Hades, which is the underworld. So very obviously deconstructive. So his persona, if you sat with him, he could see through what you were saying. He could see through you. I have the same Pluto placement, so it's the 12th house is sort of the unconscious, you could say. Pluto is the ability to see through the given to the more real. And
Mm,
everybody has Pluto in their chart, so this is an energy that everyone has. Some people it's much more prominent because his was conjunct the ascendant, so you couldn't sit with him for a minute without his pointing something out that you know.
yeah. Talk to
So
my
it's
wife. It's
yeah,
actually hell to live with a Plutonian person, because we're always, I don't know, like what's really behind that, and what's
it's
really going
exhausting.
on. And yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
have my moon and Neptune and a couple of asteroids and my south node in Scorpio, and I'm insufferable
yeah,
because it's
I
like,
know.
but what else? What
I
what do
know.
you mean by that?
Yeah.
And let's
Why
get
don't
to
you
the
just give it
bottom
to
of
me
it.
straight?
So Pluto
Yeah.
Pluto gets to the bottom of it, and Hillman is talking about ideas as well. He's saying that our seeing through uh is seeing what's, if ideas are images. And if the surface is often conceptual and shallow and two-dimensional, it's a false persona, then the seeing through is going below that. And it's understanding by inviting, what is the imaginal space we're actually in? Where was
Mhm.
that actually coming from? What idea is behind that? Because psychology, he goes into this in a lot of essays. Psychology's language is terrible for the psyche.
Yeah.
I think I said this on one of my first comments when Dick Russell started sending me chapters for the biography. I said, mainstream psychology, because there was a section on how Hillman submitted revisioning to a publisher, and they're saying this will set psychology back 400 years. And
You say, well, I'm shooting for 2000,
I
but
know that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. Uh,
400 years, that's all? Come on.
yeah, at least.
We can do
At
better.
least you have to go a lot farther back. But I was saying mainstream psychology, which I know all too well, having worked in multiple institutions and a lot of consulting with a lot of academic departments in psychology, what I said in the comment was, that kind of psychology, academic psychology, is interested in the psyche in the same way that Audubon was interested in birds. He would go out in nature and shoot them, and then he'd bring them home and stuff them and pose them in naturalistic poses, and that's what he would draw is a
Hmm.
stuffed dead bird. And I was saying that's what mainstream psychology is interested in is a stuffed dead idea experience. Turns into a behavior. So seeing through is the act of ideation. It's the act of engaging with the real, which is an idea and language, but it's also an image. It's also a structure. It's also a figure. So it ends up being, psychology trying to find its own language. This was also in Myth of Analysis, where he's talking about unpsychological language, that we need the diagnostic labels, but we also have to see through them. We have to remember what it's referencing
Hmm.
because otherwise we abstract and we move farther and farther away from it. And by that point, our language is dead, and the experience that it's trying to connect to, the image is trying to connect to, is gone.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think of that. I think of the conversations with other therapists who don't have access to these ideas, and they just sound thin. They just sound disconnected. And I think people
Thin,
who seek,
disconnected. How about lifeless, dull,
yeah, yeah, there's,
abusive to the
yep,
soul, actually? Like
yeah,
every time I hear people speaking in psychotherapeutic language, using all of the same terminology, and
mhm,
there's something like incredibly elitist about it too. It's like we have the
yes.
special knowledge. We can speak in this language and we know what we're talking about.
And I think it protects from the encounter that you were, the empathic,
Right. It's
imaginative
a
encounter.
defense. Yeah.
It's a purely defense for the therapist because they haven't done their own work and they don't have access to their own images and
Yeah.
they don't have their own ideas
It's a way to stay out of the soup.
because that's where they happen. Exactly.
Yeah.
But once you're there, it's like that's the only thing that's interesting. It's the only
Oh
thing
my
that
God. And you
feels.
realize that, like your soul is nourished by this
Oh,
experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you read Hillman, you feel good at the end of it.
I
You,
do. Yeah.
yeah, or completely dizzy and unsettled. I remember I felt when
Yeah. A
I was
little
23.
disturbed.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I
that's
struggled
good.
with the polytheism as much as anything because I had come out
Mm.
of my great learning as an undergrad was in theology, and so it was still a little bit. It was very non-traditional, very much in the mystical. Um, I mean, the study I did on Heidegger was in the religion department. My mentor as an undergrad was named Carl Scrady, and he wrote a book called God and the Grotesque that was about Fellini and Flannery O'Connor. It was about all these grotesque
Mm.
images in film and literature. And he was saying that's where the divine is encountered, is in these strange, bizarre, overwhelming, often grotesque images. It was a really cool. So I got the pathologizing, but when he started talking about polytheism, I was like, I was trying to map it onto what I'd been learning about being, and it wasn't
Mm.
working. But no matter what it is, it's unsettling. But then once the dust settles and you realize whole vistas have been opened up, you feel like you've participated in something real. When
Mm.
you get to the end of an essay, if you have to read it two or three times sometimes, but
Yeah.
when it sort of clicks, when it sort of breaks down your conventional or habitual understanding, then you sort of feel enlightened or darkened or expanded or thrown into the dark, but now your eyes are adjusting and you can see all this stuff. So it remakes you, but you know something has happened and you know it's not some kind of conceptual abstraction that takes you away from life.
Yeah. Right.
It's like a dream that hits
You
you.
haven't just kind of um, learn some new terminology that helps you frame things in a kind of slick and sophisticated way. It's different. It changes your perspective. Like
Yep.
the way I put it, and this is me coming from like my yoga background. It's
Yeah.
like I say like revisioning in particular is like a Western tantra, and it will open
Yeah.
your third eye, your
It
archetypal
is.
eye, your mythic eye, which we so desperately need in this
Yep.
left hemisphere dominated culture.
And I think Hillman was influenced by those experiences in India more than he usually
Oh,
talks
I think
about.
so too. Yeah, it was pretty significant that encounter with Gopi Krishna. I mean, he wrote a commentary on Kundalini.
He
Like,
did.
he went searching for the guru.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I think there's so many parallels between his work and yoga. Like phenomenology is like a Western yoga in a way.
absolutely.
It's like
Yes.
ground in the real,
Yes.
deconstruct everything that's standing in the way, all of the,
Yes.
illusion and misconception and misperception and all of that. Yeah.
Have you read David Loy's books on non-dualism?
No.
Or there's a more recent one. He's
Oh,
basically someone who studied in Japan. He was a Zen teacher, but he's also a Western philosopher. So he draws parallels between Eastern thought and Western thought, but he dives deep into those texts, and he's basically saying this is how we can understand them. He also says that the risk in reading them as a Westerner is it gets co-opted into ego very quickly.
hmm.
So the second book of his that I read was written around the same time that I published or wrote, finished my dissertation. I published a couple things out of it, but it's called Lack and Transcendence. And he actually quotes Hillman. By the time he had written the first book, which I think was in the 80s, to this one, which came out in 95, he had realized there are other Western thinkers that are doing this, and Hillman was one of the main
Mm.
sources of that. And so absolutely he would say, yes, this emptiness, this nothingness that they are aiming at in the East is this fertile space that Hillman is creating within Western thought. And I was watching your interview with his son, and he was saying, in the empty space, you want to do something. You start to imagine things into that space. It's fine to empty yourself, but then, you know, what are you going to do?
Have you ever listened to that interview that him and Michael Ventura did with Michael Toms
No, I
back
haven't.
when? It's great. In it, Michael Toms, I love him as an interviewer. He's interviewed some incredible people over the years, but he's talking about this with Hillman, and he kind of, he's like dipping his toes into Hillman's waters. He's not super familiar with him, and he's like, yes, well, I think in the book you touch on emptiness, and I think about the Buddhist idea of emptiness, and Hillman pauses like,
Yep.
it's got a lot more content than that.
That's exactly it. So this is my favorite new connect the dots exercise. I've been writing about nihilism and politics and the collapse of Western civilization,
Oh, cheery
and
stuff.
right, and think about Hillman and this David Lloyd book on emptiness and getting rid of the ego so that you can open out into the world. And I realized there's a passage at the end of revisioning psychology that perfectly illustrates the difference. Obviously, there are similarities, but the processional exit at the end of
Mm, oh, I
revisioning,
love it. Yeah, so good.
holding to nothing, nothing holds back the soul from its. Yeah, you've got it. I think I've got my copy here too. We can take turns, but it's though this has been a groundwork of irreplaceable insights, they are to be taken neither as foundations for a systematic theory, nor even as a prolegomenon for any future archetypal psychology. Soul making needs adequate ideational vessels. This is page 229 in mine, and it equally needs to be to let go of them. In this sense, all that is written in the foregoing pages is confessed to with passionate conviction, to be defended as articles of faith, and at the same time disavowed, broken, and left behind. By holding to nothing, nothing holds back the movement of soul making from its ongoing process. And then he goes into this elaborate description, which is now like a long Renaissance processional, slips away from us into memory, off stage and out of sight.
Yeah,
But
like everyone he's invoked in the book so
everything,
far, from
all the
Jung to
figures,
Descartes,
all of it
all right,
disappears. It
yeah,
exits the stage. But then,
the
but
saints go
then,
marching out.
yeah, when the last image vanishes, all icons gone, the soul begins again to populate the stilled realms with figures and fantasies born of the imaginative heart. That is
So good.
Hillman's gift, is he can do all that conceptual acrobatics,
Clearing out.
and then he goes whoop, and just start over again. But he holds the tension. But you're defending them as articles of faith. These are useful ideas, and they can't get in the way of the spontaneous emergence of a genuine image that happens each moment to each person.
Yeah, and I think he was just cautionary that people would take these big ideas and turn them into a kind of system, right?
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
that's what he said about the Red Book and Jung's work, and that gets into the future of the field. It's kind of hard to carry archetypal psychology forward when there's no official institute, there's no model, there's no single theory. I have a letter from Hillman to my mentor that's basically saying my work isn't really intended to be a meta theory. He said, you think of it like an art gallery, that each piece is appreciated on its own. I mean, he wasn't trying to build anything.
Hmm.
There's no Hillman Institute. There's no Hillmanian psychology. I said, well, this is a Dick Russell conversation for the biography. I said, if you meet Hillman on the road, you don't need to kill him because he's already killed himself.
Yeah, right.
But that's our problem too. I mean, it's the source of renewal. Like after it's all over, I guess it's not all over now, but he's gone and we're still missing him, but we're still talking.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, we're still in the wake.
exactly,
right? It's
exactly.
still
I like that.
stirring
Wake.
things up.
I like, yeah, because
I think
it's a
behind like a
celebration too.
boat, you know, or
Oh, that wake, yeah.
yeah, one
I
of
thought you meant
those.
like the Irish funeral.
And well, I mean, that's where the word comes from, though,
Yeah, yes.
right?
Well, and also because
It's
when they buried
following
the
the
person, they weren't sure
canoe.
if, yeah, they weren't sure if the person was actually dead, and they might, Saved by the Bell, they might pull the string and they wake up again.
I think it was more about being in the wake of the life,
Yeah,
that is
sure.
departing across
I,
to other shores. But like if Hillman was any kind of boat, he was like one of those big ships that they send up to the Arctic Circle to cut through
oh, that's
icebergs, you
nice.
know what I
That's
mean?
nice.
And so
Yeah,
part of that wake is not like this nice ripple behind a canoe, but there's
right.
chunks of ice floating and
Yeah, I just was watching the Guillermo del Toro version of Frankenstein, and that's where they start is with
oh yeah.
the ship crashing through the.
Right, that's where the book begins, right? In the
Hmm.
Arctic, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, this business of nothing, it's really an openness to everything, to anything that could happen, to everything that emerges. So it's
Well, and one of the key differences between Hillman kind of clearing the ground, that kind of emptiness, and the Buddhist ideal of emptiness,
hmm
or at least the way it's interpreted by a lot of Western
hmm
practitioners, is like the emptiness is some place to get to, you know. And I love that you brought out the end of this book where it's like, and then the soul starts to populate. Like it doesn't stay empty for long.
Nope,
And isn't that wonderful, actually?
it is
Not
because
like, oh my God, here come the images again. Like, oh my God, now I got to clear out again. No, it's like, oh, wow.
it's
You know,
another performance, another show, another production. Yeah,
yeah, right. Another production, like
and
Lawrence
and I
Hillman would talk about it, populating the stage, and it's like,
that's
oh,
right.
wonderful. What kind of play are we going to see now?
That's right.
And isn't that
That,
us? Like right before a client walks in, it's like, okay, clear the stage.
yep.
Who's coming on?
Yeah, it's like the beginning of the Muppet Show every time. Let's put on makeup. But yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I know.
And that's the liveliness. I mean, it's, Hillman can be deadly serious, but he can also be really funny. And the whole time he's celebrating this encounter, that it's even in the underworld, there's humor. Even in Hamlet, there are jokes. So it holds all of that. And I think that's
Mhm.
to me, that's what's therapeutic. Is it
Yeah.
just it there's a perspective that can see all of that as a manifestation and a performance and a celebration and it's
Right, the
comedy and
Leela, the great
tragedy.
play of life,
Yes.
and allowing all of that, like kind of appreciating, valuing, enjoying
Yes.
it all,
Because
even when it's painful. It's like, well, God, at least I'm feeling something deeply.
yep.
I'm
And right
alive.
now, especially collectively, it's this is another quote. I'm so sorry.
Here
Th
you see
so
the
in
Gemini is showing.
it's Sun Conjunct Palace, which is sort of like pattern recognition. It's the talky talk. But anyway, Aldous Huxley said, "In the race between utopia and dystopia, it will be a photo finish." And that's sort of where we are. Everything's collapsing, and it might be because something new is coming up, and something new will come up, even if
Ah,
it's,
but watch that fantasy that something new will be something better.
well, it might be much worse for a long time, but eventually the octopuses might become, the
You know what might be
predominant species.
better is humanity actually extincting.
Well, that's a legitimate, that's the Matrix speech, isn't
If
it?
you really want to
You're a virus.
dehumanize and
Yeah, you want to get to that?
de-anthropocentrize,
Yeah, no, that's right.
the
And
best
that's,
thing for the world might be for us to get tossed off like a bunch of fleas or whatever.
yeah, that's what George Carlin said, was the planet's going
Yeah.
to be just fine.
One of my favorite, yeah,
We're fine.
cynics. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you know there's a book that Spring published that has Hillman on one page and Carlin on the other?
Uh,
It's fascinating.
yep. And
They're
I
very
had the
similar.
author on the podcast. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Going down the drain, I
Yeah.
think it was called
Yeah,
something
I
like
think
that.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a similar sensibility. It's really,
Yeah.
really important. The comedian and the scholar are saying the same things.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, man, I forget, my wife was, she's an astrologer, right? And so
I knew that. Yeah.
she's always bringing up aspects of my chart, and
Yeah. Do
she
tell.
was she was t yeah, she was talking about some, it's not my language, but she was talking about some aspect of my chart that is very much about this kind of like honoring elders, because it's something that I've always done, whether it
Oh,
was like my yoga lineage, or when Robert Bly died, I had a bunch of people on for remembrances, and she said, this is very much part of your character and it's in your chart, and there's something about this that,
mm,
finding these mentors, even if you never meet them in person, but really feeling a lot of love for them. And I was like, you know what? And I finally admitted it to myself and to her. I confessed that I love Hillman. And it
yeah.
sounds kind of silly because I never met him and it could all just be a projection, and all this kind of thing. But I really feel like I know this guy
Yeah.
and that I have so much love and appreciation for him. And it's why I have so many of his books around me, because then I feel his presence, and if I want to hear from him or hear his take on something, I can reach for one of the books, and there's always something in there that speaks to my situation or my trouble, my concern at the moment.
If you didn't offend him with ignorance or getting it wrong, he could be very kind. He was
Mhm.
actually, Cancer rising. You can talk to your wife about what that
Yeah.
is. Crabby, but hard on the outside, soft on the inside. He was very empathic. He just didn't always show it in those public venues. But my experience of him was he could be gentle. Uh, he never compromised on an idea or description that mattered, but he was generous. So I think you're right. I think he was um, loving and lovable. He
Well,
just didn't let
I
everybody in on
don't.
that.
Yeah, but see, and this is in my nature too. I don't even need him to be lovable in order to love him. And one of the things that I like about him, or that I love about him, is his direct. I have a lot of fire in my chart, so I
Oh, good.
appreciate that kind of fire and that
So do
willingness
I.
to kind of cut to the quick, and the courage to do that.
Yes, that's right.
You
Yeah,
know,
and that is admirable, and it's there's a
hard
there's
to
a narrative
be
about
around.
yeah, there's a narrative about Aries being the first into the fray and that they sacrifice themselves. They say charge and they run ahead of the group and they can be the scapegoat,
Mm.
as well as the hero. So there's courage in what he did. I mean, he tackled things that you weren't supposed to tackle. I
Oh
mean, I made a
yeah,
list in prep for
suicide,
this.
incest. I mean,
It's incredible. And the isms and the institutions and the traditions. I mean, he took on everything. That's incredibly vulnerable.
yeah.
And yeah, love and respect for that too, for the
Mm.
warrior side of him. The wounded warrior, I guess you could say
Yeah,
in
that
Aries.
renegade vanguard side of him too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and I appreciate what you say. It doesn't mean he was
I
also
don't need him to be
cantankerous and
kind and
no, he
fatherly or
was
anything
he
like
I
that.
think he
In fact,
was
I'd
rather
probably resent
difficult.
that.
I think he could be very difficult. Yeah, he had that speech about Saturn's gifts, that I think Rick Tarnas was talking about this, a lecture he gave where he was saying he realized that all the symptoms he had, the coldness, the distance, the short-temperedness were Saturn's gifts, and they allowed him to do the things that he did.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, lovable is a broad term.
But even with all of that Saturnian distance and coldness and harshness, and I keep hearing the stories, talking to some of these elders who knew him since the 1970s, and they talk about, he'd rather invite everyone out to go play softball rather than sit around a table and debate something, or he'd throw together a little party and break out the wine. And so there was like that feeling of not like dry intellectualism or kind of hard theorizing or anything like that, but it seemed like he just wanted for people to hang out, and if the ideas came up, then they came up, but like let's also just enjoy our company and time together.
Yeah, I think he was a complex person, and not everyone knew all the different parts of him. I know his wife, Margot McLean, and I've heard more than the average person, but I don't usually talk about that. It's not mine to tell. But
Mm,
he was a complex uh, person who appreciated a lot more than people would think.
mm.
He tap danced, for example.
Yeah. And Tom
Yeah.
Moore loves to talk about going to, I don't know, whatever the big department store is in Dallas and shopping for silk ties, you know?
Yeah, those people knew each other. Those people,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, but it's like you said, it's the figure, it's the image of Hillman that's I think as important as the person of him. But I think the legacy is so differentiated. It's all over the world. It's in multiple countries. It's in places where we don't know it
Yeah,
exists.
like the Brazilians appreciate him more than the Americans, and the Italians are really into Hillman and
Yeah, there's a
gave him the
foothold
key to the
in
city of Florence. And
exactly. So, you know, I hope I live long enough to see the renaissance of all that. I think that would be amazing.
hey, man, don't hope for it. Let's just be the
Hoping is
Renaissance,
the worst thing we
okay?
can do.
That's the last thing to come out of Pandora's
I
box.
know. I know what he said about hope. That's what he and Michael
Forget
Meade
hope. We need
argued about.
action. We need vitality. Just,
Uh,
well,
yeah.
Scott, we care. So let's just be that Renaissance. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's right. It's Irish hope, which means you keep fighting. That's what I said about the conflict with Meade is, when Michael said hope, I think he just meant I'm going to keep fighting.
Yeah. Well, I've got my own feelings about hope. It's like, come on, man.
It can be really passive and
Hope can,
silly.
yeah, but hope can get you out of bed in the morning too.
Yeah, it
You know
can.
what I mean?
Yeah,
In
it
order
can.
to act and go out with vitality and all that. Sometimes it's the hope that gets you out of bed and to face the world that we're facing.
That's right.
That my actions will have some positive effect. So
Yeah,
I'm not so down on hope. That's one of the places where I'm like, I don't know. And I think he was just trying to make a point about kind of giving up to passive hope
I
and
think he
not
was.
getting out in the streets and doing something,
Yeah, he hated Forrest Gump because all those great things just happened to him magically. He was really offended by that movie.
Yeah, the happy idiot.
Yeah, that was not in his wheelhouse. But yeah, I mean, I think right now the hope is
There's
in
that word again.
it's well, the vision of what could happen. Here's a line. Oh shoot, there's another one. Pete Seeger told Ani DeFranco at one point she was feeling discouraged about everything, and he said, "We don't fight because we believe we're going to win. We fight because there's joy in fighting."
Mm. Yeah. I
That's
watched
a
the
form
Bob
of
Dylan
hope too.
documentary too.
Oh, right?
It was great. Or not documentary, but the Timothy Chalamet
Yeah,
one.
the
And
biopic.
surprisingly good. I enjoyed it.
Nice.
What can I say? But yeah. Well, it's been great, man. And I think like we should talk down the road because there's a
Sure.
lot to talk about. And
Yeah, there's stuff happening.
I'm glad to find someone under the age of 70 who wants to talk about Hillman and Hillman's ideas.
I know we're the young old people.
It's refreshing.
Yeah, I'm coming up on my, you can talk to your wife about this. I'm coming up on my second Saturn return this April, and there will be where my Saturn is in Aries, there will be an unprecedented stellium of 7 planets. And some astrologers are predicting revolution from this. So
Hmm.
Steve Judd is a British astrologer. He can't find another time in history when 7 different stellar objects are in the same sign in Aries.
Yeah, well,
It's profound.
we can do our work of turning the therapy room into a cell of revolution like Hillman wanted us to,
That's right. Because
So it's
we're
a
still, yeah,
psychological revolution.
we're still young enough to, you know, be in the game a little bit. Those other folks have earned their
Oh
rest.
yeah, they've laid the groundwork. It's time for them, put the feet
I
up.
watch your podcast and I'm like, I can't believe all these people I read in grad school found their way to you. How did you get them all? These are the big wows. You
I
got all the.
know. I
How'd you
know.
get
I
them?
just talked to Ed Casey again, and man, he kept saying,
Yeah,
he's like, and my last book is going to be this. And then 10 minutes later, he'd say, and I'm writing another book. I said, Ed, you're only allowed one last book, okay? And he's got like four on the go. And, he was incredible. And
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
something about, what's been so affirming to me in talking to these elders has been that living a soulful life maintains that sense of vitality and energy and curiosity and wonder, all of those things that I want to preserve into my old age. And so it's really
exactly.
affirming to me that this way of living, because it really is, it's not just a psychology, it's a way of life and way of seeing the
Yes, it
world and
is.
engaging with the world, that lends lends you a lot of vitality and yeah, and so it's
Yes.
been such a gift to meet some of these old folks and just be amazed at how they're still thinking and sharply too, and
Yes.
with a lot of humor and but gravitas as well. It's really
That's
cool.
the blending. I agree. It's the both and
Yeah,
that you don't have to get overly serious or only serious.
yeah, or kind of regress into some infantile state. Yeah, you can be more, and I think that's like that kind of complexity of Hillman. It's like he's not
Yes.
just a puer, and he's not just the hawkish, prickly guy, that we contain multitudes. And I think if we, like you said earlier, if we get out of the way, it allows that multifaceted soul to shine through in all different ways and different
Yes.
situations in response to life. And I don't know. That's a vision
Yes.
that I embrace.
Yeah, I think that's the best way of saying it. That's why we do the work, is because it's so alive.
Yeah. And it makes for more interesting people, which I personally want. I want to engage with more interesting people. And I want to live in a soulful, interesting, rich, diverse world too.
Yeah,
Like my big enemy is monoculture, you know.
if that's
So
what that
this
is.
is like the
Yeah.
frontline work is like, helping people to become more fully themselves so that, God, we have a more interesting world populated by more interesting and interested people.
Yeah, and that's worth fighting for.
Totally. All right, man. Been
Okay.
great speaking with you. Let's get on with the rest of it. Kronos is calling me. I gotta, time is up.
Understood.
Let's
Same
go.
here.
We've come to an ending.
Good.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. It's been a
You're
joy.
welcome. Thank you for having me.